I guess to make
interviewing
it
with.
easier, Spook's just gonna log in, so she'll be here, but we'll both be coming through this channel.
Oh, you're fine, Jimmy. She doesn't even need to do that. If she doesn't want to, you're fine. Your mic sounds really good, by the way, Jimmy.
Trying my best. But thank you.
Are you guys having a good
Definitely
weekend
having
so
like a
far?
hungover brain. How do I spell Sanguivore again?
Trying.
Just hover their channel on the side. It's Sanguivore.
Vorie.
Dude, my voice is bothering me so much, man. Because I just know it doesn't sound right.
No, it sounds, but we're the ones hearing your voice. You sound exactly like you always sound. Relax, White. No one.
I don't, man.
Pork belly's fucking.
I think he's just getting the
Yeah, making
pork
belly's hard, honestly. But
I've never had pork belly. It does not sound like something that would interest me.
Do you like bacon?
Yeah.
Then you'd like pork belly. This white boy just trying to be difficult. I swear, man.
I'm really not, dude. Like,
you
I
got
actually have such
that
a limited
baby palate. Man, it's got that baby
It's very
palate.
fatty, but if made well, it's not bad. You just
It's
feel
not
guilty about it.
I literally just have a child's palate. That's like actually when Jamie showed me the blood, I was like, even if I like knew this shit was like super good for me and like gave me superpowers, even I'd be like hesitant to eat it because I'm like, I don't know, I'm just a pud when it comes to trying shit.
For real, boy, I swear. This boy needs to learn, man. You need to learn.
Are you ready, son?
Yeah. Interview with Pragmatic Sanguivores. I say we just say, alright, let's just maybe, just play class. Yeah, whatever, we'll just go from here.
Let's do interviews first, then, or introductions. Hold on, let me message the chat so that people aren't here.
Yeah.
Did you already message? Okay, you did.
Yeah, I'm gonna toss another ad here and be like, get in the chat.
I'm doing it right now. Do
it.
All right, so Jamie, Spooky, welcome to the Neet Life podcast. If you guys could go ahead and introduce yourselves briefly, just give a little synopsis about who you are, whatever you want to say. Doesn't have to be a lot, doesn't have to be a little, whatever you're comfortable sharing.
All right. I'm Jamie. And I am a sanguivore, blood drinker, and I've been active in the community for about, well, originally probably dating back to the '90s, but more actively in the past couple of years. Spook.
Hello, I am Spook. I live in Canada. I am a single where I drink blood daily. I love it, and I have not been part of the vampire community or the Sanguivore community in the online presence, so to speak, but in Montreal and Ottawa in the actual physical presence in with friends and stuff. So that's about me.
Awesome. Well, welcome, guys. That's okay. So that's actually really interesting that you actually have more of a like an IRL relationship with the community, not an online one. How big is the community in Montreal, if you don't mind me asking?
Back in, I'd say, the mid 90s, we were probably about 13 of us between the two cities.
I think we have to separate the fact of what is the community when we use that term. If we're talking about the general vampire community, as you might find online, that's a very broad term, and that's going to include a lot of people who don't practice as we do. They might be spiritual, they don't even take blood at all, or whatnot. And because of that, of people who are like very serious about taking blood, that's a very small community globally.
So I guess is that, were you in the more serious community or were just vampirism in general before Spooky?
Yeah, or maybe just before. Could we just maybe just stay? Like, could you just maybe just describe your specific like what the pragmatic sanguivores are about? Just sort of in the grand scheme of things, so people can make the distinction between people who like call themselves vampires and then what you guys consider yourselves as. Just so like we can kind of start off on the right foot, so people are aware that you guys aren't you're not Twilight fan fiction people. This is something completely different.
No, pragmatic sanguivores, by as we use that term, basically means without the pomp and circumstance, was without the mysticism, without the spiritual or supernatural connotations people like to apply to the word vampire. In fact, we typically don't use that word, and that's why we tend to use the word sanguivore as a separation or distancing from it. Um, but we look at ourselves as human beings who, for one reason or another, seem to have um, a health benefit that we perceive from taking blood. There's no supernatural powers that are granted by this. There isn't any kind of ritual or anything like that. We don't look at it as life essence containing some sort of magical substance, but merely a chemical compound, as blood is, and a nutritive one at that. And that we believe perhaps in it contains something our body seems to like or be able to use.
Okay, and then I think Spooky said that she drinks it daily. Are you consuming it as daily as well, Jamie? And do you notice any, I guess, distinct benefits, or when you go without, do you notice that?
Well, we both we both have our own donors as and we have throughout our lives, but yes, daily meaning typically on the amount of 10 milliliters per person per day is good. 20 milliliters per person per day is better. Without, um, the effects are varied per person. Generally speaking, um, mentally is one of the first areas you'll feel a lot of things: depression, anxiety, just general malaise, whatever the case might be, can affect you. But then your overall fitness and just well-being, your energy and motivations can be affected. Your soreness, perhaps even other things depending on the person. It is not a consistent thread specifically. That's how it affects me. How about you, Spook?
I'd say it's the same where it's more like you can't focus, you get tired, demotivated, there's nothing really there, and everything pings back to the same overall cause.
Now, I want to make it clear that I don't look at blood as being some panacea. That if you take it, somehow you're cure
The
all
cure.
your ills, and that it is
It's not snake oil.
It's
absolutely
not
not.
something.
Yeah. But so Jamie, you said that you're consuming 10 to 20 milliliters a day. Like, so I guess a question that I have that spurs off of that is, if you had just this unlimited supply of fresh, clean blood, however you like to get it, if it was just always available, I mean, would you consume more of it? Like,
Oh,
is there ever a
certainly.
point where, okay,
You would, as much as you care to have, part, depending on the individual. Some people like a lot. Some people prefer to augment their human blood with animal. Depending on where they are, that's easier to get than others.
I say it's a lot
Um,
easier, right? Because I think,
well, not necessarily.
no,
Most butchers may not necessarily have that, depending on
Okay.
what cities you live in. Some people get it from Asian markets, but that's
yeah, see,
usually
we have
a frozen
Spanish markets
product
here.
and sold in tubs. That is usually it's stabilized with sodium citrate and it has a rather off-putting taste to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That's my
you
next.
know,
So that's like kind of sorry to interrupt. Just like my question was sort of related to like the types of like, who do you choose who your donors are based on like certain criteria, like knowing like if they're smokers, drinkers, and not like if they're clean living, if they're involved in like certain like how do you? Because someone asked in the chat, I think they put like how do they not get AIDS? But it's sort of like it's like when it comes to blood, it's like there's such a high risk of like I'm assuming all kinds of transference of stuff. Like there must be a very high trust level. Like how do you kind of like is there criteria for how you find these people? Like and how do you I mean, because obviously you're drinking their blood. Like, is there, like, are some people's blood better than others? Like, is there, or is I don't know. Like, is there any kind of like distinction between like the people you're actually like looking for donors? Like, you're like, oh, this person looks extremely healthy. Like, I want them to be my donor. Or this person like they drink and they want to be my donor, but I don't want blood that's got a bunch of I don't know booze in it.
yeah, you do pick people. Yeah, to be honest, the way that I have in the past is I found people who um, I just was friends with. These are people I built a relationship with. I mean, it's got to be trusting. What you're doing is has inherent risks to it. you have to trust them. They have to trust you that you won't cause them harm. So there's a lot of aspects to it that way. On top
Almost
of that,
like a sexual partner in a way, you know. Without, I'm not saying it's a sexual act, but
you
is this
might
you're
use
inheriting the same
similar,
risk? Yeah.
you may use many similar
Jeez.
safety protocols. All right. If you're talking about, let's say you're like, I've found people in the kink community, but in doing so, we're also very mindful of safety measures and protocol that you do. And that means um, getting tested, being transparent about multiple partners or something like that, or drug use, or things like that. These things are discussed. These things are part of the conversation to assess whether or not you have made a due diligence effort. You've made a good effort to mitigate the chances you have of getting any kind of disease because you are taking a risk. Drinking blood is probably the most unprotected act I think you can do. Um, so
Yeah,
you
definitely
have to
up there.
be protected. You have to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who claims that they're somehow magically immune to disease is lying to you. We're very mortal. We can very easily get sick if we're not safe. So
Is that something
safety.
in the
Mhm.
the overall vampire community? Do they actually like? Is that something? Could you mention that no one's immune? Is that something that some of them will say like,
Oh
"Oh,
yes.
really?" Like
Yeah,
Oh
that's actually. I
yes.
wanted to just say like it seems like such a vulnerable. It's like being a vampire in all media and stuff is portrayed as such like an alpha and like aggressive position, but it almost feels like you're in such a vulnerable state because you're actually going through with the act of consuming someone else's like essentially dangerous fluids, like because there could be all these transmissions. It's like you make it seem like such almost a vulnerable act rather than like it's sort of like portrayed as like, oh, I'm taking your blood, I'm in control of the situation, but in reality it's sort of like you're in this mutual bond of like there's a level of trust here that's like insane because you're taking such a huge risk consuming it. So it's very interesting to kind of get that perspective of it, that it's like you're not doing this as some sort of like it just feels like a fan, like, these other communities I assume especially there's like more of like a fantasy to it, whereas it's so like, I mean, obviously you use the word pragmatic for a reason, but it's an interesting perspective to look at it as such a vulnerable act rather than like an aggressive act or a dominant act.
Well, that's why we wanted to make an emphasis on the pragmatic part because I feel like personally in the vampire communities, they put way too much emphasis on the supernatural and that they could be these mystical beings and we're immune to the different ailments that they think that they can just get away with. And then like, I'm sorry, but you're human. You gotta accept these things. You can't just fly on the seat of your pants and happy wishes.
that's actually okay. So just a quick two questions from chat. Someone said, "Do you guys drink the blood of any other animals?" I don't want to butcher the way this is spelled, but the Messiah tribes, for example, drink the blood of cows.
Yeah, I've heard of them. They'll actually, the whole tribe will take one whole cow. Um, I've had beef blood before. It's perfectly fine. It's a little bit meatier. What I find the difference between livestock and human is a human being can actively make sure that they have all the vitamins, nutrients that they can acquire from the supermarket. Uh, the animals, on the other hand, in a livestock in a contained environment, they don't have access to all the nutrients that they could possibly get. And most animals nowadays are kept in like solitary confinements with no sunlight. So the quality that you can get is much richer in a person's. So you'll have a more well-rounded flavor.
Okay, that's
Or
awesome. And then
livestock and
Yeah, could you talk a bit about flavor? Like, I am super curious about like what are the kind
yeah,
of
somebody
what are like the
so some
distinctions and stuff?
somebody asked, do they drink Bloody Marys? So I guess you can talk about flavor, and obviously that's kind of a silly question, but at the same time, are you cooking the blood or not? I don't want to say
No,
cooking.
no,
Are
they're
you
not
using it
cooking
in
it.
no? I
some
mean,
people that cook it.
yeah, that's what I
Oh,
mean.
oh,
Are
because
they
I thought if
using
you
it in
heated it,
recipes
I
or?
thought if you heated it, you sort of
There,
got rid of a
there
lot
is
of
there are people who do that. In fact, some people we used to know actually regularly publish articles on recipes that use that use blood in them. Now a lot of these recipes are not supposed to be intrinsically weird. Animal blood, is used in cooking in many cultures around the
Blood
world,
sausages and
and
stuff like
so
that.
it's
Blood
it's not
farce.
it's not that. weird in other cultures in the world. So these recipes have, some credence to them. But for our use, cooking it ruins it. Once it's exceeded the body temperature, um, we feel it starts to denature and is no longer as good as it could have been.
Well, it's the same reason why, if you like take a look at Inuits, and whenever the settlers were coming across the ocean, they'd get scurvy on boats, and that's because they'd cook all the meat and their vegetables, and you lose a lot of nutrients and proteins, and vitamins get broken down when you cook them. And Inuits could survive purely on raw meat because if you look at different organs like the kidneys and stuff like that, they contain vitamin C, so they can survive on that diet without cooking the animal. But nowadays, Canada won't let them continue those practices because of the mercury levels in animals for the fish. So it's kind of
It's
sad.
crazy. I actually know quite a few Inuits because I grew up in Alaska, so I know Inuits, Inupaks, a lot of different native native Alaskans, and it is crazy how much. It's me, Ed, from the Discord. Oh, sorry, I was reading something from chat. So that brings something up with eating raw meat. Is that something you guys do as well, or is it just like because I know
I,
that
I mean, I enjoy a mid rare steak as the next person, but
yeah,
what is in meat? I think a lot of people misconstrue that as blood. If you get a steak and your plate's full of red liquid, it's not blood. Um,
juices?
it's what's called
That's
myoglobin.
myoglobin is it happens constantly in your body, as even as right now as we speak, myoglobin is being produced in your body. It's when meat or flesh tissues, muscle tissues decay, and it's usually sent straight to your kidneys and flushed out of your body as a waste product. So it kind of is like,
I mean, it has its functions. It does serve as a carrier of of something. I don't remember the use of it, but it isn't blood. It isn't hemoglobin, and it just is red in color and a liquid, and it's in muscle tissue. So people instantly associate and think that's blood. But when meat is slaughtered, it's bled. It's the majority of the blood that is within the animal has been drained out, and that which remains is coagulated. It wouldn't flow freely like that.
All that stuff's like
Um,
not even actually blood, right? It's just like kind of the leftover.
No, it's not blood at all.
Yeah, it's like what's that stuff? It's whatever the red juice is that's in meat that's not actually blood.
yeah, that's for sure.
Myoglobin.
it's
It's like
Myoglobin.
so. What's with the? I guess the flavor part. I don't think you really got into. Like, can you taste the actual differences between I'm not trying to but like maybe like race or gender or age or like are there certain things you've noticed from your different donors that you're like, oh, like this person
um
tastes much more
I can go I can go first, and then Jamie can maybe say what she feels.
awesome.
I tend to see that females tend to have more plasma than hemoglobin normally because of their exercise levels. If you have a males that tend to go to the gym, they'll have a higher like hemoglobin count, and so they're if you let their blood settle, they'll have less plasma than hemoglobin, and so they'll have a richer and more savory taste. Whereas a female will be sort of softer and not as uh, yeah,
Cool.
what was
I
And which
usually
one do you
have some
prefer?
pictures of.
Do you have a preference? Sorry.
Oh, um,
Like,
I don't have a preference. I like both of them. I think of it like going and having different types of vegetables. Some taste like this, some taste like that.
okay,
Um,
yeah, like it depends on the mood you're in. You're like, all right, I could be in. Like it's like
I
a red
think a
or a white
person
wine
who
kind of
has
thing.
a healthy person who has a well balanced, whose blood is healthy, meaning that the plasma and red blood count is good and it's not over of one thing than the next. Um, that is a more agreeable flavor. Plasma itself is not a delicious flavor, um, and so it's good that their blood is healthy. It's also good that your donor is healthy. You're concerned for their health, but some people, some people, the tastes are often rather subtle. I think, I mean, one could say a diabetic, depending on the blood sugar, maybe that might have an effect of it, or other factors like that. Um, I tend to not pay as much attention. The blood that we drink is often affected in part by the anticoagulant that is in the tubes we use, which is called EDTAK2. And it is a very stable anticoagulant. in the sense that it will hold blood in a liquid state for in excess of 30 days. I would say you'd want to drink it within 30, and it it does a pretty damn good job. Its flavor isn't too disagreeable. But that being said, there are people within the community who debate the safety, who debate the safety of these anticoagulants, and some feel that there are risks associated in some measure or not with using ones or others, such as, um, I said we use EDTA, but others might use sodium heparin. Some might use sodium citrate and
Or
different things like that.
CPDA.
CPDA. CPDA is what's used in a blood bag if you go to the Red Cross or something.
Okay, so there's like a whole process in actually preserving it properly. Like you basically have to become like a scientist to properly maintain this. Someone in the
It
chat's asking.
sounds like it, but it really is not that.
Well, most of the time, the containers they automatically come for their amount of volume. They already have the right amount of sprayed
Oh,
anticoagulant in
okay,
Yeah,
like they're good.
yeah.
Okay, so you're not
You
actually
fill the
measuring.
bottle, you give it a little shake, and you're good.
Okay, so someone in the chat's just like saying, "What would happen if you stopped drinking blood? Did you ever try to go without for a long period of time?" And then someone said, "Aside from blood, what does your regular diet include? Like, is it a supplementary thing, like you just eat regular total food, or is it sort of like you have
Yeah,
like
I
a
mean,
specific diet?" And
as far as diet goes, it's very normal. It's not unusual. Um, if you go without, you start feeling less than well. I wouldn't say you just like you weren't gonna die. You aren't gonna burst into ashes, and you aren't gonna, you're just not gonna feel your best. You're not gonna feel your best. You aren't gonna feel as you're gonna reach your potential that you can get. You're gonna be running on like 80%. I don't know. It's like it's as though you have a. This is unscientific, but like it's like having a nutrient deficiency. You might be able to live with that nutrient deficiency, but you're not going to be doing your best because your body's not going to be getting all it needs.
have you heard about like it's not like it's like a thing that they're doing like a service. I guess like old rich people are doing this now. It's like you pay to have like a teenager's blood basically circulated through your own veins. So what they'll do is it's like basically like some sci-fi stuff where like you basically run someone else's blood through your veins because supposedly it's like the hormones, like the younger antibodies, all this
Well,
stuff's really
younger
good for
people
you.
have a higher T cell count and a higher.
Yeah.
It's just T cell.
So it's like, do you think
And
that you
so
kind of
they
obtain the same
repair, and
benefits?
these cells are usually go and they scrub. They also have scrubbers in your bloodstream that go and check the cells to make sure that they're replicating properly. And as you get older, you get less and less of these. So I can see why they're trying to do that. I don't know if
But
that is
do you
actually
see any
works.
kind of connection though potentially that like by consuming blood the way you are and sort of saying like the way you feel like a malaise after not consuming it, it's kind of like because you're almost getting energized by having this other blood. Because there's like I think there's like been kind of weird studies like that where like other people's it's like I know there's like but this is a weird but like a fecal transplant for someone who had like some weird bowel issues and it fixed the person's like I don't remember what it was but it like it's like someone
I mean, it's
else's
the same
body
thing.
basically fixed
Those
like
are a
someone
bit of a
else's with someone else's blood coming into yours, like potentially it's giving you like a benefit or something like.
It's because they are actually doing that in Eastern countries. Like
Well, in Canada, I know that they're
that's
doing that thing with the blood from the teenagers. It's like
yeah.
$8,000, and they're like,
This is how people have claimed that they've cured AIDS and things like that. Though they just keep going in and getting fresh blood, like basically the same principle as dialysis. They get it cycled through, and they claim that if they do it enough times, they're just in there every week or how often, twice a week, I think you can do dialysis, and eventually
So,
whatever incurable disease they have is gone. Because
so
you've
it's
just
like
cycled your
giving your
blood out.
car an oil change over and
Yeah,
over again.
exactly,
Eventually, you get all
exactly.
the shit out.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
call that more akin to dialysis, and it's a very
yeah,
different process because what they're dealing with is a transfusion type of consumption. Their
yeah.
body is processing it temporarily,
Whereas you're
um,
digesting it.
or we're digesting it as a nutritive kind of
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Well, I can't say that I have the answers, but from my point of view, I like to say that I think that it stems from the fact that maybe how we have lactose people who can break down lactose and some who can't. I think that there's probably an enzyme that we're not being able to break down that other people do, and then inside your closed circulatory system, can have up to 250 different variables at any given time present in it, depending
Wow.
on whether or not you're pregnant or you're male, you're female, your age. And so I think there's a possibility that we might be absorbing or being able to get that in its raw state. because I know a bunch of Sangs in my lifetime I've met, and I keep communication with at least easy 27 that I know that actually actively take. And out of those 27, there's easy like 6 of them, I think, that if we don't take, like my mom included, they have to be on vitamin B12 shots.
Oh,
So
so
I
your
don't know if
mom's
that
also a
has
What's the
an
blood?
sanguivore? Your mom's also a sanguivore?
yes.
Oh,
For
okay.
me, yes.
Interesting.
Oh,
So,
did you inspire that?
or yeah, or was it the other way around? Like, were you raised by her, so you're also into it, or yeah, did she learn from you? Like, yeah, was it chicken or the egg?
She let me come to that on my
You
own.
don't
I
need
was
to hear
born legally
things like
blind,
that.
so I didn't have
You
an
just a
idea
boy.
of gender,
You need to think
age,
about good
race.
thoughts
Mom
while
is a
you
sound,
still a
dad is a
boy.
sound. They
There's
don't
plenty
have
of time for all the other.
a sex to them.
Sorry to interrupt. We just
And
got a subscriber, the Fun Fox. Thanks for subscribing to the channel, man. We appreciate it. Sorry to interrupt.
so there was no gender to those things, and so I didn't for a long time. I had to go to a social adjustment class because I, at a young age, was craving the blood, but I didn't associate people as people, and so I had started harming my sisters and my peers in my classrooms.
So, like,
They
would you
basically,
rather get
yeah, they
blacked or
screamed or whatever,
bleached?
or they didn't like what I did to them, but that's how I started acquiring it. And so my mom easily was put me to the side and was like, okay, we're gonna solve this problem over here. So I wasn't penalized for it, but I was shown why it's bad to do certain things.
So, and then you said, so your mom is basically supplementing B12. You said if she wasn't consuming blood, then she would most likely have to get B12 injections.
Yeah, she will go in if she doesn't have any donors that are, because she lives out in a remote area, and
Yeah.
right now she's waiting on a spinal surgery, and so whether or not she can't actively just go out because of the hydromorphine to go and collect from her donors, like what Maddie or I would do is take a cooler and take all your supplies and go visit your friend, and then come back with your stock. My mom has to wait for people to come
Get
to
the
her.
loot. Yeah. So with the B12 thing, if people don't know, B12 usually, I mean, most people just get it through eating enough meat in their diet, correct?
Most people, yes.
Yeah. Because
They're not
that's something that,
vegetarians, right? Like,
yeah, that's
it's
something
not
that
a dietary
vegetarians and
restriction,
vegans.
right? Like, cause you guys are carnivores as well as sanguivores, correct? Like, it's not like you're all vegetarian who also drinks blood, correct?
Oh no, I'm not a vegetarian. I like
Okay, no, that's what I assumed. I was like that.
Well, it's interesting. It's not necessarily directly related, but there was a conversation once about how would a vegan
A vegan
be a
single.
sanguivore?
Yeah.
Oh,
And
because
my
humans can
response to
consent,
that
though, right?
was
Well, because I thought it's like veganism is all about the idea that like an animal cannot consent. Like you can't ask an animal to take its milk.
correct.
But it's like you
That's
can
how
ask
I
me to have my
interpret it.
blood.
And since your donors have consented, you have full permission to consume that. There's no moral um, question there. You're not hurting anyone who hasn't willingly chosen to assist you in this process. So it's not like an animal that didn't have a say in the matter.
Oh, so it actually could be a dietary supplement for some vegans because essentially, like, you could go through a cruelty-free process of getting human blood to drink to get kind of some of those proteins you wouldn't be getting through your actual diet.
There was a very strange. There was an article not
It's actually a hot
a few
take.
months ago.
It's kind of
About
based. Like I
a
like the idea
restaurant.
of that, like a blood-sucking vegan who just I'm still a vegan, but I'm getting some of my energy and some of my extra vitamins through this process. Totally.
Because because vegans are actually like, I don't want to say like some blanket term, but for the most part, vegans are malnourished because even supplemented B12 isn't the same as what you're going to get from an actual animal, or the way that they're getting it. Even like the
There is
B12 that you're.
Go on.
No, you're fine, Jamie. I didn't mean to cut you off.
There's a weird video that cropped up some time ago about a restaurant that actually draws blood. I think either from the guests or I don't. It's probably not in the states.
You gotta keep
and
Feeds it to
then
you.
yeah, then they make a sausage or they make food with it and they serve it back,
Out of
which
your
to me
blood?
is really weird.
Yeah,
That's
If
that
I
is
can find the article, I'll
I would probably do that
Yeah,
if it was
link
my own
that.
blood.
that's
I'd
just
be
really
like,
weird. The only thing is, I don't believe in auto feeding, meaning
That's what I was actually going to
auto
ask that.
cannibalism.
Do you guys ever drink your own blood, like in a
what would
drought
be
or
the point,
something?
though?
Where
Right? Like, what would be the point?
No,
Because you just drain
I
yourself,
wouldn't.
right?
One, there's lots of reasons not to do that. One, it's like trying to fill a glass full with the same glass.
while chipping it.
You don't actually gain anything from doing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's you're not you're going to just hurt yourself doing it. It's not. It, and personally, I've never enjoyed having my own. And a lot of people, when they first start out, I think that's sort of something they
Because
do.
it's an easy to source it, right?
Yeah,
It's on
they
hand.
don't
It's
really know, but there's no benefit from doing that, only harm, because if you deplete your blood in one way or another, you only now put yourself into a deficit that somehow by drinking it you hope to you're doing it, you're getting what's it for lost returns,
and I guess
you're
it
not really
wouldn't
getting.
Well,
Yeah.
it
this way,
wouldn't quench that itch, or it wouldn't like numb
Well,
that itch in a
well,
way. Just
no,
because I
because
know.
you have to understand, like, what because she's like, you can't if you're trying to drink to actually, they're doing it for the actual gains, right? To get rid of the malaise and whatnot. It's like if you're drinking your own blood, you're literally just gonna end up losing, like, in the energy process of draining
Yeah.
yourself and drinking it. You're gonna end up like it's net negative.
because it takes
There's
a
no
lot of
positive.
energy. It takes a lot of ATP. Okay, it's like your mitochondria have to fire up really hard to be able to let you digest, and so that takes a lot out of the body. And so the fact that you're now harming yourself, so you now have to heal and then have to consume, you're basically constantly putting yourself in a double deficit.
Yeah, we tend to not like to use the word energy because energy is a kind of a mercurial word that can mean lots of different things to different people. And so we look at it from the chemical process that the body is supplemented with the fuel by which to do all the functions that it does, as opposed to calling it energy. We call things like ATP, mitochondrial processes that
So
actually
more so
break
looking
down.
at the scientific.
Yes, it's very chemistry. It's very based on practicality. Again, going back to the pragmatism, instead of looking at things from sort of a catch-all sort of way of
Yeah, because
approaching
saying
things.
energy, it's like you leave that whole like psychic vampire field open.
Yeah,
It's
you're
like
talking
because
like
I'm drawing on their
actual.
energy. You're not talking about the science. So you guys are definitely
Right.
more in tune with the
It's
scientific
about
aspect.
finding it. It's about, instead of excusing the things we don't understand with an explanation that is not based on anything provable or reproducible, we prefer to follow more of the scientific method. Fall back on science, fall back on repeated things, even to the extent of which you start saying, I might be wrong. But you don't say it's because of a supernatural reason and that's why this happens. And I explain it with that. No, we can't do that.
Some questions from chat. Let's see. So I was gonna say, why not just eat meat? It sounds like a lot less work than drinking blood. And then someone also said, are there any dangers to drinking animal blood?
Well, the first one about the meat again, meat doesn't have any appreciable blood in it. It's myoglobin, not hemoglobin, and will not effectively suffice. It doesn't have what we need.
Okay, so that's
Just
actually a
because
question. It's like, so is there stuff in blood that's actually completely separate from meat itself that like, and like what's in blood that's complete? Because I sort of thought that there was like you would be able to get a
You can
complete
go look
diet
at the
without blood.
Wikipedia list of all of the different chemical components that is in blood and meat.
blood
And
is a complex tissue with a great many aspects to it and its own chemical compositions. To be honest with you, I don't know enough of the science to tell you how or why I think it is. It's just I'm going back on this idea that I believe it is a chemical function, is a chemical compound. It has some nutritive value, which I
Mm-hmm.
believe may have effect. I don't know how exactly or why, but it seems to. There's people who pursue the scientific exploration of this and to find those answers, but that's a very difficult area of science because it's considered very fringe,
Mm-hmm.
and
Totally.
those studies are difficult to conduct in a very credible and
well, I'm finding
respectful way.
people that are actually good candidates as well, that are actually not just faking or wanting to have that call or claim as vampire, because it's like almost fashionable.
Mm-hmm.
Because
No, absolutely. I feel like that's like the big distinction between you guys. That's so interesting. But it's almost like the not an oxymoron, but it's like the idea that you're the pragmatic sanguivores who are drinking blood for pragmatic reasons, but then also not looking at just what you could maybe include in your diet that would be a better source of. I mean, I guess that's not, because more the idea is there's a stigma to drinking blood and there's a risk to it. Whereas like if you were to maybe figure out that, oh, I need to get this specific cut of meat or blood sausage, or I need to take these supplements mixed with this, like if there was a dietary way to do this that didn't involve like a risky scenario, like the pragmatic solution would be to find that rather than to choose one of. I mean, because like I mean, obviously there's like a certain level of relationship there. Like you're not just drinking the blood of randoms, but it just feels like. I mean, I'm just not a very trustworthy person, I guess. So I'm just like the idea of having to
Yeah,
trust
because you
somebody
don't.
to like not have sex without a condom, like it's like in their own spare time, especially if like we're not actually in a relationship. I'd be like, I gotta trust that you're like, you're always
Yeah,
wrapping it up or not, whatever the hell, like.
could you guys go into that, Jamie? Like, so I guess one, do you ever get blood from your partners, people that you're romantically or intimately involved with? And then just, I guess, the whole donor process, how you go like screening someone, how that even comes up in conversation, and just how many donors you try to keep at one time. And then I guess just the whole process of actually getting the blood, like how often you're doing it, how much you collect,
Yeah, because the
etc.
risk is a
Yeah,
hundred percent
there's a lot
correct.
to that.
Like
Okay.
it's 100
How
percent
you
risk though, right? Like you literally with sex, it's like potentially you get the disease, but with the blood, it's like you 100% if they have something will get it, right? Basically, because the way you're
um
consuming it.
yes, there are risks. Would it be 100%? Nothing is 100% in life, I guess. But is there? But there's a heightened risk. There's definitely a heightened risk by exposing yourself to a biohazard material such as blood. Um, I just want to. I'm going to answer more of those questions, but someone asked for the photo, and what you're seeing in that picture, for those who can see it, those are um, those are tubes.
Put that on
Um,
stream, Sid, so
and
that
the
they can see what
ones
she's
that
doing.
what you're actually
Yeah,
looking at here
I gotta, I gotta
are
get.
both the same sort of thing. The ones on the left side that are all red are simply they just got put in the fridge, so they are well mixed and they haven't separated yet.
Oh
The
wow,
ones
that's the
on
separation you were talking about.
the
That is
ones
insane.
on the right side have simply been in there for a short while and it doesn't take long. Mostly after a couple hours, they'll all settle out like that. The heavier red particle, the heavier red blood cells sink to the bottom, while um, the yellow liquid is the plasma, which is on the top,
Okay,
and
now
that
it's
is
on
what
stream.
blood is made of. Those tubes are 10 milliliters per. The purple lid is what indicates the EDTA, the anticoagulant that is used. Those tubes are used in phlebotomy, and you will most likely see those if you ever go to the doctor's office and have blood taken. They come in a variety of colors depending on what kind of tests the doctors may have called to do for you. But that is what those tubes are, and they are taken using a relatively simple process of drawing blood from the arm. Um, but caution is absolutely necessary to ensure that you don't hurt anyone. Um, this is, you have to take care because you are putting another person's health at risk when you do this. Um, and you want to make sure that you carry out your process in a very sanitary, a very controlled kind of situation. You don't want anyone to get any infection or any harm to happen to anyone. That would be very, very bad. We care a lot about our donors because they are providing a
I,
service that's from the heart. It's asking a lot of a person. We say to the little person, take the shirt off their back. Well, for a person to bleed for you, that's a
Yeah, I was about to say
that's a pretty big request to ask of someone. So
that's
we
why.
need people to do this
So when you
willingly.
when you get the when you get someone to be a donor, that's what I. There just has to like for me it would for me to do that for someone else, I would almost have to love them, like because I guess I'm definitely a selfish person in terms. So, but I guess
Or
like
is
if
there
I was
There
single,
financial
are
incentive? Like, do you ever
many.
just pay for it? Oh, sorry,
I
Joe.
have never paid for it. However, there are people I know who have.
I
They
have.
they have they've will pay a person $50 and they'll pull a a quantity. Um, some people use bags. I don't use bags myself because I actually kind of enjoyed using the smaller tubes. I think that's convenient. But I don't have relations with my donors in a sense. I don't have a sexual relationship with them. I find that it potentially brings in a power struggle that could exist within a relationship because there's something each side wants from each other, and
it's like you
that
get in a fight at that point. It's like, all right, well, I'm cutting you off the blood, Jamie. That's it. It's like I guess I don't know.
I've had a lot of struggles with that because I've had partners that want to be donors or think that they can they have magical views of how things work or they like the
The
imagery of
mysticism.
it.
Yeah.
Yes, and considering if you're looking at 10 milliliters per day, just as a hypothetical for 30 days, the amount of recovery time it takes to recover 480 milliliters is almost that time frame. So one person could never give you 10 milliliters per day without going into an unhealthy zone. So
So you can't
having
really
one
be intimate
partner
with one person because then they're gonna like, not actually be able to satisfy you in a certain sense, like because they literally can't provide it like without dying.
without
A person, when you go to
yeah.
the when you if you have donated blood, you have likely donated in the excess of 400 milliliters, if not more, depending on your, you know, you. Some people can, some people can't, and that's okay. But so the amount you've taken at a blood drive was more than we would take, and so it's not that it's an egregious amount or something. It just simply looks like a lot if you're not used to seeing blood. Most people aren't used to seeing more than what would be found in a little cut, and it bothers them. It's natural when we see blood; we tend to naturally react with a certain degree of
Panic.
apprehension. Usually, that indicates something is
It's kind of
wrong.
hardwired into you, you know, like evolutionary. It's like, oh, this is the stuff that's supposed to be inside my body. It's suddenly out. That's a problem.
I think there's a lot of misconceptions. People have the misconception that if you drink blood, you're going to get iron poisoning. That's one we hear a lot of. Is that
So yeah,
you're going to
someone
get
in the
iron
chat said
poisoning.
that. Someone in the chat definitely said that you could get
It
iron
simply
poisoning.
doesn't have enough iron to cause this, and the quantity that you consume isn't enough to accumulate that level of iron, which would cause you harm. You just simply aren't having enough, unless you also have animal blood. And in that case, there are people I've known who will get a large quantity of animal blood and then they'll work on that. And if they're drinking, you know, like a pint a day, and that's a lot in my opinion, if you're going to be doing that, you know, could there be a risk involved with that? Possibly. It entirely depends on that person's body's ability to handle that.
Hmm.
And individuals do vary. You know, some people can handle certain minerals and things, and others can't.
Okay, someone in the chat was asking, why don't you just straight up inject it rather than drink it? Like, I mean, if you can trust the person.
Oh, that
Oh,
makes me
that's a terrible
shudder.
idea.
That makes me shudder
uh,
just because I'm
oh,
Oh, oh
extemporaneously.
my
you don't
god.
want to do
Oh,
that.
oh,
No,
oh,
you
is
don't.
it is it because if
Oh,
they're not the same
fuck.
blood type
Okay.
as you, you'll
All right.
die,
All right.
right? Like it's
There's
because you die if
blood
you get mixed
101.
with the wrong blood type, right? I think I just realized as
Yeah,
I said it.
it literally, if you, it's death. It's the reason why
Holy
it's death. If
shit.
you put the
Well,
wrong blood type in
well,
your veins, is
someone in the
because
chat asked it. I didn't even think twice. I was like, yeah, why wouldn't you just? I didn't even think about the fact that if they're the wrong blood type, they'll die. Right? You do die,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
it's very dangerous
Well,
to do
what
this.
happens is you have antibodies and retroviruses in your body that aren't the same as mine. And when you inject, let's say, if I was to put my blood into Jamie, just hypothetically, straight into her veins, I could instantly kill her or do severe amounts of damage because her blood would automatically associate mine as being the enemy, and they don't look right, and they're just
Yeah, they're
war
gonna
against
attack
each other.
each other right
And
away.
let's go further on this because we were talking a little about people who had transfusions for elective reasons
Mm-hmm.
earlier in the conversation. So this process is done. Okay,
Yeah.
people do that, but they aren't doing it for the same reasons. They're usually doing it because it's considered a form of what we'll call it alternative medicine. But
But would you not kind of
the
consider drinking blood for health benefits sort of an alternative medicine? Just in terms of
I
like,
guess into a sense it could potentially fall into that, and I won't deny that.
I mean, if you had
Um,
blood that you knew was the same, I guess no. I guess it's just it isn't the same
no,
thing, and you
because
don't consider the
it's not
benefits for the same reason. Like you consider the consumption for dietary
the
reasons much different than
consumption
the
is
injection
yeah
and
because
absorption or
we
whatever.
take it in this way not because we feel it's I guess it's one of those experiments that is uh, the risks of conducting that experiment is too great, I think, for casual experimentation. You know, and maybe in a lab environment where you can really reduce and can you know you control things a lot better and stuff. Maybe then, but I think in our application, doing such a thing is far too dangerous. and so consuming it is the safer of the options when it itself has risks too.
Someone in the chat asked a rather facetious question, but I guess it could segue into an actual question. They said, because if I have autism, is my blood worthless? I guess. So what about, you spoke earlier briefly about people having diabetes or something like that. So what about something that isn't like, obviously something that you're not going to catch, from consuming someone's blood. But I guess you'd probably want to avoid that, right? Like someone that's diabetic or someone that has
Oh no,
low iron.
diabetics! I have a sweet tooth for diabetics.
Really?
Because
All
their
that
blood is
insulin or
because
what?
that blood is super sweet. Like, is it just like you drink it and you're like, damn, like you
It
diabetic? Oh, could
depends
you
on it
diagnose
depends on
someone?
the individuals. There's different kinds of diabetes, and
Yeah.
how it affects the individual, and their blood composition does vary.
Would you be able to not diagnose, but like if someone kind of knew that said that they were totally 100% like healthy, and you like taste their blood, and you're like, I don't know,
No,
this
you
tastes
diabetic, bitch.
like would that be a possible situation where you could like you drink their blood and be like, I think you might have this issue going
I
on, or no?
wouldn't diagnose a person
I
for any
would.
reason that way because there's a lot of factors that can affect the taste of blood, and I don't think taste is a strong enough indicator of a diagnostic indicator of blood health.
See, it's like crazy because I have such this
Um,
like
we're not
when I think
doctors.
about the,
I'd say go see a health professional.
Yeah,
but you wouldn't even make the recommend. You'd be like, damn, this shit tastes like a Snicker bars. You need to go to the doctor like immediately or something. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, like not like you're specifically diagnosed them, just more the idea that like you're like, oh, well, I mean, this tastes like something I've had before, and
Yeah, or
because I knew that person, it's like I knew about these extenuating factors, so it's like because you're saying you don't have these factors, and I'm tasting, just experiential.
Well, I did freak out a coworker one time because I love diabetics, and diabetics have like a sweet smell to them. Like just like when you're passing around them, they if they haven't put any like deodorant or anything like that, they actually naturally have like the sweetness to them. And one of my coworkers, I was like, I walked by her and I was like, "Are you diabetic?" And she's like, "Yes." How did you know? And I'm like, "I just have a smell." And she's like, "That's really creepy." And I'm like, "Okay, we'll just leave it at that."
Yeah, so I'm not sure if that's super awesome or it's like I can smell diabetes. I guess that'd be useful just in general. People are like, you tell someone, let them know, they're like, oh shit,
well,
I'm not
it's
diabetic.
a it's an it's an insulin issue. It has to do with the pancreas, right? So I mean, if there's a disorder there, it may have comorbidities that might give indicators one way or another. So it really isn't necessarily that weird that a person who suffers a particular disorder may give off other indicators that are detectable. So it happens all the time with things.
But as for the autism thing, I don't see any problem with people with autism. If
I
they're
mean,
if they
autism's
have a healthy
okay.
lifestyle, the autism is more about how
It wouldn't
they
like
process
affect
things
your
in the
blood.
mind.
Yeah, it's like just it'd be like a genetic in your DNA type thing. I don't think it would change
Well,
your blood.
I want to give a little caveat. If a person was autistic, they would have to be a very high functioning autistic
Well,
person
they have to still be able to
to be
consume.
able to consent
Yeah.
legally and
Yeah.
offer. I would never want to take advantage of a person who has the inability to make a sound decision for themselves. Um, and diseases, like if a person, let's say, had Lyme disease, okay, was in that situation about a year ago where I was a person very interested in being a donor, but they had Lyme disease and were taking medication to control it. Now, everything I was reading basically said a person who has Lyme disease technically is okay so long as it's controlled with the medication. I myself was very leery about just
Oh,
following
100%.
that.
How do you know that they're taking their medicine? Like
Exactly.
that's putting so much on that person.
I can't test for that specifically. I can test for hemoglobin counts because that's easy, but I can't
Yeah,
test
you
for
need
the
all
presence of
kinds of,
Lyme disease.
yeah. That seems like, see, that's a risk. Like I can't even say that because I did drugs forever, so it's like I've done some fucking super risky shit for a lot less. So it's like, but that just seems like a crazy risk to just like take this person's word. It'd basically be like sharing someone's needle off the word. Like it's like, oh, I don't have this or that, and then you just put that blind faith in them that they're taking their medicine or that they're doing that. That's why I asked, like, what is
Well,
your, so you're,
there's a few things that I would say that complicate the use of needle use in drugs. If you're sharing needles, once the needle has been taken out of its package and used once, it has now been exposed to a great many things, not just the blood or the tissues or any other contaminations that could have come from the first
There's still the
user.
environment.
There's environmental issues the longer it's been out, and you could be introducing
Oh yeah.
bacterium or other kind of harmful things into the next puncture. So, because of that, that has a lot of other issues involved with it. When we use a needle, it is a single use, and the needle isn't exposed for very long. It's very controlled because you don't want to risk infection to your donors. One, your donors are incredibly precious to you. They're good friends of yours. You never want to hurt them. That'd be the last thing in the world you want to do. And so, taking care of their health is extremely important, almost more important than your own, because you're the one who pursued this. They're the one helping you. If anyone's going to get burned for this, it better be you and not them.
Yeah. Someone asked, can you get high if you drink the blood of someone that's on a drug? I think it would be such a trace amount, right?
You're on the same page. Now I saw that question. I was curious.
We have a social experiment. I have a roommate, and he is like a heavy pot addict, and we really want to know if he's an edible.
It's a joke.
Oh no,
He's an edible.
We would like to know if he's a
Is he
walking
an
edible, and he slightly wants to engage.
THC binds to the fat, right? Though it doesn't, like THC binds to the fat in your body, not your.
If a person were, I asked that question once, like, what were they, if you were to consume the blood of someone who was using heroin or cocaine or other traceable kinds of things, and let's say had to take a drug test, would you have
Would you piss
on? And the likelihood was extremely low because, one, the amount of those drugs that actually reside within the person who used those drugs is fairly low on its own. It's been absorbed by the liver and other parts of their body that has affected their that's where it resides within their body. And so if you were then to consume that blood, you are now getting like a fraction of a fraction.
Yeah, and it's water soluble. All those drugs are water soluble. They're going to move through your system so quickly at those trace amounts that it's like if you were just drinking the average amount of water that a normal human being would consume, it'd be out of your system so fast.
I mean, maybe you might if you drank the entire contents of a person.
If you just emptied them.
I don't recommend doing that.
If you just emptied
I know
them.
you
By the
can
way,
get high off of the pee of people who've done meth.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Whoa, Sludge, I'm going to need you to elaborate on that really quick. How do you know that?
There's a comedian who did a bit about it where she actually did that.
Where she drank the pee of a meth head and got tweaked? Okay. Thanks.
Spooky, your walking edible joke was a big hit as well. That was enjoyed by the chat thoroughly.
Well, I'd really like to know if he is. I know that I understand the science of it, and it's probably ridiculously low parts per million.
If you chopped him up and ate him, you'd have a better chance.
Well, no. What if he's? I don't know. I just feel like if you're high all the time, there has to be some sort of effect on the. It's like if you're saying you notice other things in the blood, like may stuff with their diet or their diabetes, or it's like it seems like someone who's consistently like. I've smoked weed since I was like 15 years old. Like I've smoked weed longer than I haven't smoked weed.
Dude, you're in Canada. Link up.
I'll ship him some blood. Shit. But it's like, I would be so curious if that shit got you stoned, or if it just got you stoned but made you feel a little relaxed. You're like, oh, this is some mellow blood.
This is the amount that you would be consuming on average. Let's pretend you had 10 milliliters. You're having a very small amount of the whole volume of this person's consumption. So you're having a very, very small amount. You're getting a trace of a trace of a trace.
Our chat is just like going off the deep end. You guys could probably reel it back in. They're not smoking blood.
Why snort coke if you can eat a living edible?
I wouldn't want to. No, I don't like
this question.
Now you let it coagulate into like a little little coagulated ball of blood. You put it in a bong and just
smoke it up like a dab, right?
Yeah, exactly. A blood dab.
Don't say that, dude.
Oh, I'm gonna make that community. That's my sub community is gonna be dabbing dried blood.
Blood dab.
Blood dab. I'm the blood. All right.
All right,
It
let's
would.
reel this
I
back
don't
in.
think that'd be good. No.
That would be. I just imagine the smell of that would be fucking atrocious.
I think that it would be because
I don't know. It might
a
smell like
burning
meat cooking.
animal
I think
doesn't
it would
seem
be
very
bad
good
for
at
you
all.
too. Like I don't think anything about that would be like the smoke would be rancid. Like be like
Well, think about what char is on your steaks. Well, I mean, again, we're talking about mangled
Yeah.
and stuff, but if we're just talking about
Oh,
animal tissue being charred. It's 6 1/2 dozen. It's not gonna get you
it's like
fucking
I
up.
watched my friend shoot meth, and he's just like in the middle. He's like, "This shit is not healthy." That's exactly what vaping blood would be. This is not healthy. Oh, what if you vaped
Well,
it? What if you put it in your fucking in your
I would
jewel?
say that you'd have
ooh.
a better chance if, let's say, it was hypothetically the lipids of somebody who gets
The fat.
high all the time. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Because yeah.
turning that into an oil because basically dabs is the oil concentrated. So
So you've
that's a
actually
good.
put some thought into this, Spooky.
I okay.
Really, you could make the next brand of jewel pods full of
The
blood.
it's still gross because that's still a person. That's still a person, and getting their fat
Yeah.
is really hard. Well, I guess if it was lipo, but that's still gross. No, that's gross.
But
Fight
so
Club,
going
yeah,
back
you
to
just
the
go
donors.
outside the clinic, you can pick up the bag of human fat, you bring it home. It's all good.
So back to the donors question. Like,
Shudders.
I guess that's like my hardest thing about the whole like trying to understand it. I guess and get a good understanding of it is like. So how do you go about like getting a donor? Like, let's say you've just met someone. Like, do you tell people right away? Well, by the way, I drink blood. Like, is it something that you think is
You
like,
want me to go?
I guess, a core value to who you are?
I
Like,
think
because
the question here is one, it takes work. It is not easy. Secondly, it's incredibly based on the context of where you're meeting someone. For
okay,
example,
true.
one would think maybe going to a cool club or something and meeting people would be a place, but no, that's not. People aren't interested in that. Um, I've found my best donors in places, different places. One I met at at my pool, like billiards. I met one of mine there. She was just, we got to talking, we became friends, and she was okay. She wanted to help me. That's how she sees it, is helping someone.
Yeah,
Then I also looked in the kink community. I'm not actually doing any kink in the sense, like I'm not doing a weird thing, but for them, they enjoy it.
they get some
They like it because
pleasure from it.
whatever works in their mind, it is a satisfying thing to do. If it's helping someone, that's one thing. If it's a give and take, if it's a power thing, if it's whatever it is to them, but they're happy to do it, and it serves them in a positive way, and they enjoy it, and no one's getting hurt. We're all adults here, and so one thing that was nice about the kink community is people typically are very open-minded.
Oh
They
yeah,
go into those environments and those communities because they have interests there.
yeah. Because
They
they're
go
like,
to
oh,
Yeah,
you want an
fringe.
electric sounding rod in your dick? That's fine. Or that's like so tame, or blood's so tame compared to some of the shit that goes on in the community. I imagine.
Just some
I
got,
had
Mostly
that.
it was.
got a couple
At
questions from the
first, I thought it wasn't. I one time I thought that, yeah, oh god, I'm gonna be. They're gonna think I'm some bizarre blood
But then
player,
you're like,
needle
holy
player or
fuck,
something.
people are doing this.
It really isn't that weird because I have all the situation, like the actual act, is in ways not all that different than seeing a nurse, and usually involves watching a movie and having dinner. It's pretty casual.
And that's what you said last time that you'll throw on a movie, get some food afterwards. When we first talked, Jamie, that first night, one of the things that I like went through my head later, I was like, if I was to have given someone my blood, like I'm like such an anxious person, I would be like worried, like at some point, like, damn, is Jamie drinking my blood right now? Like it would go through my head so much, like, oh, is my blood still sitting in her fridge? Oh no,
That's a weird thing, and I think a
that's
lot of
just
times the people who do, they are
yeah.
proud of it. Like they. I'm going to sound really corny here, but let me just explain one donor's mentality, or what how I perceived it, was in their mind, despite the fact that I didn't like to use the V word, they saw it as I was their vampire and they were my donor. And it was a weird kind of relationship, and they
This
liked it.
vampire donor.
They liked it. They were really proud to do it. Um, it's not. I wasn't going to chastise them for it. It brought them happiness. It made them feel satisfied, And I mean, to me, it resulted in a positive thing for everybody.
Okay, some questions from chat quickly. So can blood expire? Jamie,
Yes.
Spooky, whoever wants to say. Okay. Yeah. So what's the shelf life on it?
If you're doing with the red tubes, because in my photo I have the red tubes, those are like within seconds. That has no anticoagulant, and it's pretty much
It'll turn to jello in about 15
So you're
seconds.
drinking that shit hot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that usually I will take at the end of a draw, so that'll take one for Jamie, one for me, and that way we can have one fresh one right after. And most donors don't mind if we take in front of them. They're usually really comfortable with that.
That would just blow my lid right there. Because I'm like pretty well versed with using needles and shit. Like that shit wouldn't scare me. But then as soon as you're like, oh, by the way, can I grab a hot one? I'd be like, oh fuck, this is like I don't know.
See, like what Jamie was saying is that they actually really like it, and I was actually talking with someone the other day about this, and we can donate, let's say, money to a child in Africa, and you'll see a photo of it, or you'll get a photo of that child. But people nowadays look for these instant gratifications, those achievements, those right now, what can I feel important about? And I feel like the donors, they get to be able to help their friend in a way that they can't help another friend in any other way, and they get to see the gratification of those actions right then and there, and I feel that they get that happiness and that appreciation instantaneously.
Right. I think one of the bigger things that I feel differentiates the pragmatic, or at least our variety of quote unquote vampirism versus maybe others out there, is that there's a feeling of helping and a feeling of that relationship between us and our donors. It isn't based on sexuality or in creating a role play environment or something like that. It is an act of someone helping someone and feeling good because they helped
It's an
someone.
altruistic thing.
And
Yes.
we don't look down on them. Like there's parts of the community, vampire community, there where they'll treat them like mundanes, or that they're lesser, like they're like muggles, and I feel that's very role play.
No, we don't have.
That sounds like
Oh,
a
And
fucking
I'm like, no,
bad.
what I'm doing for you. And if you're actually actively taking blood from somebody, you wouldn't actually have that kind of mentality. They are actual people, and they're your friends, and they're
because you
helping
just
you.
rip the
They're
needle.
not anything lesser.
Thanks, you
You're not gonna
piece of
keep
shit.
a donor if you call them a shithead.
Well, you have to understand that there is a fairly large part of the community that are very different than us in the sense that they are very spiritual. They see themselves as
Ascended beings.
supernatural beings. They see themselves, or at least something psychic or whatever.
Which I guess, without sounding rude, that just sounds like mental illness. Like
I
that
believe it
aspect of.
may very well be, but they feel that they are somehow special and use this kind of thing. They like that V word. It makes them feel as though there's
Empowered.
something empowered. It makes them feel like there's something unique about them that gives them something to hold on to. When in their real life, maybe there's a lot of things that they are unhappy about. I don't really know. But unfortunately, that makes up a bulk of the community. You see a lot of that in various different
Me and Sid
roles.
had our encounters with them.
Yeah,
Someone in the chat's asking, like, do those people actually buy the fangs? Saying, like, do they use fangs, especially to draw blood? Do they ever visit fang smiths?
Like there's two large open people that you can easily Google, and that like the
Large,
fangs
like
and
the guy that
the Garrison Dormants.
well-known, published.
You have
the people
Father
you showed me, right,
Sebastian.
Jimmy?
There are some.
There's Father Sebastian, who's a cult leader, and doesn't say to drink blood or anything like that within his members, but you have to be part of his group. You have to buy his Fang Smith.
It's part of
He's
the
a Fang Smith
process.
that makes them.
Part of the ritual.
So he's making a buck off you, the fact that you like.
I was going to say, so he's just chilling, right?
There's a lot of groups out there that are part of a spiritual type of thing, as they see themselves, and they identify with vampirism as being some sort of ascended being or a special.
Like as if you were a human and then you were a Pokemon that evolved.
and that they do like fangs for
Dracula, I choose you!
Right?
I love you.
But the thing is, we don't wear fangs.
Who's that Pokemon?
For a couple reasons. the one why we don't need to. I'm not trying to look like a movie character.
Yeah.
Secondly, they're impractical. You wouldn't want to bite someone. It's not a sanitary way to extract blood. And even if you did, you're getting capillary blood if it's on the surface. And if you were to bite someone in the neck, you would potentially injure their.
That's murder.
Um, yeah.
If you fucking bite someone on the neck hard enough to murder them, maybe you are fucking ascended at that point, though. I feel like that would take some serious torque.
To the next, you're ascended to the next penitentiary. That's what's happening to you.
You're gonna ascend it to
You're
level
gonna be in
3.
trouble.
Yeah, so somebody asked that earlier, and I guess I looked at it as facetious. They said, "Why not just bite them and drink from the neck?" By the way, ask as I follow what they think about vampire lifestyle coffins. That's kind of what they were just talking about. That they don't subscribe to
Vampire
that.
lifestyling to me are people who don't necessarily. Okay, let me try not to be too blunt here, but I think many of these individuals have the majority, the great majority, do not have a need for blood, may not take blood at
It's a
all, and in
LARP.
fact believe themselves to be psychic vampires and take magical energy from people through the ether. But that all that stuff withstanding, I believe lifestyles are trying to satisfy themselves because they have a need to feel that special quality that I am something different than a normal person. I'm this thing. And to me, much of that comes about. Again, we go back to Bram Stoker. We go back to Dracula. We go to a time in the Victorian age where people were very repressed, especially when it came to sex. And suddenly you had this book, which was basically a kind of a thinly veiled porn, where Dracula was a very asexual being character in the story, and it was really the first time vampires took on an attractive role. Prior to that, vampires were a monstrous, nasty, gross sort of thing. They weren't anything one would want to like
Associate with.
sleep with. Yeah, you didn't want to sleep with. It was the first fuckable corpse. Is basically what Dracula
Gay
became.
necrophilia.
And
It's like straight sexualized the entire.
truly, Dracula was a sexual character, and from that story, I think really came about a lot of the visualization, a lot of the characterization as we that have created that lifestyle.
Well, even a lot of the modern writers will do that too, like Anne Rice, where you have Louis in the stat, and Louis obviously normal people will pine after Louis because he's immorality and the harm and
Oh, I
stuff.
think that's.
But it's they're very much gay couples in a sense that they, if they could have get it up, they would have relations. But she doesn't let that have that. She lets the readers put that in their mind that
Yeah.
that there's that passion.
I'd say like vampire, not what you guys do being sanguivores, but like vampires in the media sense are definitely like super like over sexualized. Even like just from looking at like one of the most popular series, when I think of vampires, I think of the Underworld series. It's like every vampire is just like hot as fuck, wearing spandex latex fucking suits while they fight crime, and it's just like
vampires serve a role in fantasy in the sense of they are a supernatural creature that is not only attractive but in many cases are almost godlike, but they once were people, so they ascended to this through some act, and in doing so they gained not only allure but the ability to live a life far more interesting than the life they once had, and are part of big things. Like if you talk about Underworld or Twilight or any of that bullshit, they're part of these great big organizations and wars going on behind those scenes that regular people don't know. Their lives are intrinsically more interesting. This appeals to people. People want
because
that interest in their
you
life.
can't be bored. You can't just turn into a unicorn. But at least with the vampire myths that you have in modern days, you can be turned or this or that. I personally don't believe in turning.
No, we don't believe that can happen. That
but
doesn't happen.
That could be the appeal that a lot of people have and that imagery. And so having a night where, like, I went with Maddie or Jamie, I should say, to it was in Rochester, New York, to a vampire party court, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it was a party thing.
It was a party. It was fun. It was good to see all kinds of people all dressed up in all different versions of vampires. There was even vampire hunters there.
That was fun.
It was adorable. But as for the dressing up and stuff like that, it's actually kind of fun to go and do that and to be around the people that want to do that because it's in that fun environment. But past that, I feel that if, let's say, I was to dress up like a vampire and go and wear a little cape and fangs, and I'm pretty sure all my donors would probably run away from me, thinking that I'm this really crazy
Lying.
person.
Yeah.
And there's an issue here.
Yeah, you if you meet a person who's dressed up like a movie character and they're saying, would you
Bleed for
mind if
me.
I come over to your house and bring some medical
Believe.
equipment with you, or medical
They're
equipment
gonna be
with
like,
me, and
hell
stick a
no.
needle in you? They're not going to trust you with something that can hurt them. They want someone who is,
Sane, right of mind.
is a person that's going to say, this person looks like they've done their homework. This person looks like they're going to treat me in a safe way and is accountable for what they do. Um, and that's important. That's where we reach an impasse with some of the community. There are people who call themselves sanguivores, but all they ever really want to do is take a pinprick and just a little lick here and there, and it's part of a ritual. It's part of a whole process that is
Or
that they make a,
sexualized.
right, and we
Yeah.
consider that something else. That's a
That's,
different thing.
to me,
See, that's when it. Oh, sorry,
I
Spooky. I
think
didn't mean
if,
to cut you off.
not a problem. I was gonna say, to me personally, if you're just taking a pinprick, so like if the most based, is that what your name is?
Yeah, oh, Sketa. I'm sorry. I forgot my name was like.
Change your name back. You were like, who's the most based? This white
Right,
boy.
the most based. If you were to, let's say, like, be like, take a pinprick and you be like, and like watch the little itty bitty drop of blood like leak out and use that as like a sensual arousal kind of thing. To me, those kind of people are blood fetishists. They're
Just getting
not.
their rocks off. Yeah.
There is blood fetishists, and in some cases, if they admit that that's what they're into, in a sense, that's kind of okay because they know what they are, and they aren't claiming to
They're
be
not
anything
pretending
else.
to be anything else.
There
Yeah.
are people in the kink community who are into blood fetishism. They like to play with it. They do things with it, but they don't claim it's for their health. They don't claim to be magical creatures. They know what they're doing. They're just
Just
this is
like, damn,
part
this
of
shit gets me off.
this is the part of the game. Yeah, it's my thing. And that
Would you
there's a
engage
certain
them if they like if someone's kink was to have their blood sucked and it was a source for like them to be a donor? Would you take it through like the traditional
again there would be a definite conventional excuse me a contextual issue going on here. Honestly, I would prefer to be able to do my use phlebotomy because
Yeah.
I like to be able to visit a person once, and
But if they were
supply
super
myself
specific,
at
that
least
was
one.
like the reason. Like, let's say their blood was
If
really
they were
fantastic,
very,
and they
if
were
I
like,
was,
"I want you to suck it for me because that's my side of the like what I get out of it."
if
Is
I
you
had
taking
no
it,
other choices,
and you would okay. So like, and like it, and like, is there obviously there's no you obviously do not have a preference for that because you like your phlebotomy kit.
I
but
would not be happy with that, but I would do it because I
Kind
have
of like
no other option.
the only
It's like a
way.
quid pro
If that was the
quo,
only
right?
option.
It's like
So,
I guess is there like part of the pragmatic sanguivores that are into the traditional, I'm using saying traditional as in like traditional towards what a vampire is supposed to be versus the pragmatic using the phlebotomy kit. Like, is there anyone in the community who is completely like you in terms of the subscription to the belief that it's for health benefits, but at the same time is like they're kind of into the like the taking through the
There are other groups that are similar to us, and they too use phlebotomy if they know what they're doing. But generally speaking, there's a lot of folks out there that are into doing the cuts and the bites and the surface thing. It's what most people know. It's in a certain sense, I can't really blame them. Knowing phlebotomy is not something most people pick up, and so such a specialized thing. But then again, we're falling back into a very niche crowd of people. The number of people who I feel would actually take benefit from having a bar fridge stocked with blood is a very small portion of people. So, the great majority of people out there are serving are after something else. And what that is not entirely clear. But
So
we don't we're lumped into that if a
yeah.
person hasn't taken a chance to get to know us. They're gonna say, well, the VC, in which you call it the vampire community, it's an acronym we use, is includes a lot of different people. People who believe they're animals, and we call that the other kin, the witches, the mystics,
the other
the
kin
what
are
have
part
you.
of the vampire community.
Strangely enough, yeah, they seem to.
Actually, what do you think of
So
psychic
question from
vampires?
hold on.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Question from chat. It says a lot of donors. This seems to be someone that knows about Sangs, by the way, just from what they've typed, or is interested in it at least. So they say a lot of donors interactions are actually quite sensual and erotic. According to my info, Sangs prefer to drink from donors of opposite sex. Can you guys confirm, deny that, or is that more of a?
I think what they're talking about there is that most people use surface feeding, and because surface feeding means putting your mouth on another person's body, most people tend to find more comfort in doing it with a person of the
Oh, because they're like,
opposite sex
if I
because it
suck blood
It
out
can
of
be
is
this
more
dude, I'm
sensual.
gay.
it's personal contact. There's definitely a personal space bubble issue going on there. You're definitely in an
You're
intimate,
also exposing
close.
skin, and
To
it's usually
skin.
skin that normally is not seen, so that way the cuts are not open to the public.
Yeah.
Do you
Doesn't
guys
look like
ever do that?
self-harm.
Because that,
I have, and I've done it with same sex and opposite sex. I keep it
I guess
completely
it's.
like
Are you
there's no
bisexual
sexuality.
though? Okay, and you're straight or?
Oh yeah, I don't care what nether bits you have as long as you're a Nick.
Oh,
Yeah,
I've taken it
too much.
from both genders as well. I don't really have a preference, but then again, I'm not. Once I take the blood, I put I clean them up, put a band-aid on them. This is if I'm going to be doing
Send them on their way.
and cover them up. There's no that's not part of the foreplay. There's nothing going on afterwards.
Yeah. So it's that same person goes on to say guests are most likely in quotation med sangs.
Well, they know a term. We are former medsangs.
Okay, so what's the
we
difference?
were part of that group at one point.
Okay, can you elaborate on like the difference between you, like, or why you left that group? Like, what was the?
I don't really want to go into the politics.
I can go into a soft reason why I left that group. I when I first joined that group, I used to know back in Montreal a place called the Red Cellar, and that was my friend Camille, and she used to run it, and that's where we could go and bring our donors and sort of eat out, so to speak.
Cool. Okay.
Holy
Like
shit.
like a vampire bar, or like yeah. Like
Well, you brought your own donors, you brought your own supplies.
Oh,
BYO,
BYOB, bring your own blood. Oh, that's
Uh-huh.
amazing. Is that what the ad said
That's
for
actually
it?
crazy, dude. The Red Cellar?
That's
I
actually.
would not. Hold
Was
on,
it
just
was it actually
quickly.
gothic and
I
shit?
would
Like...
not be fucking around in the Red Cellar because I would be so scared that I'm getting chopped on exit, bro, and like just harvested. No way.
Well, actually, it was a really good and friendly environment, and the people in there are very respectful. So it was a very clean and very structured environment. Everybody respected the rules. It was not. It was. There was nothing terrible that went on in there. However, considering that most of the French Canadians are very Catholic or Roman Catholic, when things got word or a relationship fell apart somewhere in the community, somebody said something to somebody, and they entirely trashed your house. So.
Almost like
But-
mafia-like interaction.
But that's why when I heard there was an online version of what the Red Cellar and that it was only primarily Sanguivores, I was kind of curious about it. And at that point, the Red Cellar was getting some flack because they were the main two members there were going around and being very aggressive with the overall vampire community and saying that the so-called psychic vampires are this or that and asking and demanding them to have proof. And like Carl Sagan would say, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and they couldn't obviously supply that. And we don't have the on-board or on-staff support teams for anybody crashing emotionally. And so they were kicked from a lot of spaces, and there was a lot of negative flack. But I wasn't part of that, and I wanted to just talk with other sanguivores, especially meet other ones in other countries and see how things are going. And I thought it'd be cute and adorable, just like my Hello Kitty band-aids.
You did get a comment on those, by the way. Besides me, someone in chat was like, I spotted them.
I know, it was adorable. I like dry smiley faces on my bags too. But no, what happened is Jamie had did something really nice January 14th of 2018, and we needed really good PR for the Red Cellar, and we decided to open up the Red Cellar to the public and allow the size to come in and the other kin and be able to see what we're about and how things are going and what exactly it is, and to remove that aggression.
I want to make a clear disclaimer here. We were not administrators of this Red Cellar that we're discussing.
You guys are just members.
Members. It had its own separate leadership. I'm actually don't really want to talk too much on the politics here. Myself, I'm trying to move on to different chapters of my life.
Just distance yourself from the bullshit, basically.
But we left because I didn't like what was going on in a support sort of way. I work with helping and counseling youth that are going through crisis and trauma. And so, in a support or a Discord environment, there are certain things you can and cannot, I'd say legally, even if it's internationally, is not morally and ethically appropriate to give out advice to people that you cannot and don't have the professional or the medical training to give that advice.
And that was going on.
And that was going on. And I wanted to have a discussion with the leadership team in a closed group because we were part of the Lampreys, which is a closer night group, and they didn't like that. So
it definitely became an issue, and there was a lot of people. It didn't go well. It didn't get communicated well, and it turned into a definite divisive issue. Now, the going on, the real question that was asked of us was because someone mentioned medsangs and what's the difference between medsangs and us, and in many ways we're very similar. I would say that we, on the whole, however, are more stringent on our belief of separating ourselves from the idea of any mystic concepts. We don't want or don't really endorse the idea of people using the term vampire if they are not taking blood. We don't really we won't entertain the ideas of mysticism and things like that. So we're a bit of a hardliner group in that regards. We're very much into the practical, I like to say the rational approach, and so because of our a little more stringency, it has isolated us because the majority of the community does embrace those concepts, and so for us to be pretty much like we don't believe in psychic phenomenon. Well, that's gonna
for me, it also goes on another line. It's like I like to compare it like this. So think of vampirism and vegans as two on the same lines. They're both dietary choices. So if I wanted to be a vegan, but I eat meat for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, and I eat meat popcorn. How can I call and I do that for 7 days a week, every month of the year for the next few months, but only have a piece of lettuce every blue harvest moon. Does that make me a vegan?
Makes you woke.
Right. It's the thing here.
You're just fucking woke for the sake of it, so you can tell your friends that you're vegan. So actually, to touch on that, what somebody said in the chat was, I think the source of the issue is that philosophically, I don't know why the hell I read that word like that. Some people have a belief in metaphysics to one extent or another, and some don't. A lot of sayings consider their condition biological and having nothing to do with metaphysics, but bringing this up in a VC where size are present is a good way to cause a big fight real fast, because most medsangs are afraid of taking your stance due to aforementioned fights that arise with the size in the community.
I would say that's true because we are the size, the psychic vampires would account for the great majority. And what we're basically saying is you're not vampires. If you're going to be anything, even though we don't believe in psychic phenomenon, you're maybe some sort of an energy user or something. But don't call yourself a vampire. But
you're saying.
But in saying that, you're basically you're picking a fight and saying something like that.
Sorry.
I think almost all these people are mentally ill, right? That claim that stuff. Like you're just.
I would say that sounds like mental
illness. Acquire blood requires a lot of trust and a lot of attention to detail and a lot of respect. And to just say that you can claim and fall under the same bracket and run under the same roof is kind of, to me, a very slap in the face, because what I do is in the physical reality and it has physical repercussions, legal repercussions, if not done properly. And I could put my friend in a hospital. It's not something to be fun and dress up and laugh about.
And that explains a lot. I don't know. I just think it's so, because even going into that Discord, it was like they were so extremely hostile. Even when I was like, oh, we would just like to kind of get your perspective on this, because essentially, like, you guys come from a perspective that you can actually like tell me about.
Actually, considering you actually were the one that talked with them, and it was Damien that talked to you in that group. And
I did go off on him.
Text.
Yeah.
He's the one that believes.
So, like, would you rather get blacked or bleached?
Infections through blood.
ironically thinks that if he was to take an AIDS patient's blood,
that vampires are immune to a disease. Yes.
See, and stuff like that's like, okay, put it to the test. Oh, welcome. Who's in need? Somebody just became a follower. I gotta move the alerts. Appreciate that. But no, I just think it's like stuff like that. It's like you could put them to the test. Like all the things you're claiming, I think are completely valid because you're basically being like, I experience a better health or a better sense of well-being by consuming this blood. I get better energy benefits, etc. These other people are claiming like I can train people at my work. I can use my mind and focus it and hurt people, or I can consume blood and not get diseases. And it's like, how does the community not? I mean, obviously you guys are fragmented a bit, but how was he like? Because he seemed to be in charge of that community. Like when I went in there, I was just like, hey, would anybody interested in it?
This is not common knowledge.
Okay.
That's why.
It's part of the VVC. Well, he's part of the VVC, which is part of the vampire Voices of the Vampire community. Yeah. They seem to think that they talk for a large variety of the people, but it seems like a very fractured group at this point. Mixed leadership, where the leaders are not really leaders, or you wouldn't want to call these people leaders. Some of them are actually really nice people and really good people, but some of them, I don't know how they got fitted in.
I think that's a lot of political discussion that is, by and large, not most people are going to follow along with well because it doesn't really matter now.
It's a lot of politics.
To me is that there's like a politics within such like a small sub community. Like it seems so niche, and yet there's it's like fragmented between all these different kind of subgroups within like a niche. Like I think just like vampirism itself is a niche, but then there's different types of kind of like you're saying. There's the med sangs and there's you guys. So there's two different types of people that are kind of pragmatically doing it. And then there's the psychic vampires. There's I don't know. It just seems like there's such a wide variety of people that how do you actually come together in a sense of not like it just sort of seems like you guys would have your own Discord, they would have their own Discord, the psychic people would be separate.
Well, they've been around since 1996 officially, and the community in itself has been bouncing around since at least the 90s. I mean, I first discovered it back in 93.
Holy shit. Okay, so this is like, the depth of this is insane, the history.
Well,
it goes back further.
City.
It goes back,
and even before the internet.
Right, yeah, it goes back further, and then you would have had like zines, and you would have had local scenes, and you would have had underground shit. Only until recently, really, did it become something a lot more on the surface because of the accessibility of things like how the internet has grown over the past 15 years. Has made visibility of even the most obscure niche groups something that's accessible.
Yeah. Could you maybe talk about just like how things have changed? Like considering you say you entered in the 90s, it's like, well, now that we're on 2019, like what are the changes in the community, the demographics, like the methodologies, or even just like kind of why people are getting...
We can go separately.
Yeah, I would love to hear both your histories. Like, did Twilight affect anything? I am curious about that. Yes. If when that got popular, did it bring in like a bunch of...
Anytime there's a film, you're going to have an influx of people with interest. Many of them are fleeting interests. They're just people who are fans or have a momentary fantasy they want to explore, or whatever the case is. You're going to have people who come from different age points in their development. Particularly people in their teenage years have a tendency to like to, they're trying, when you're that age, you think you've kind of on the cusp of figuring out the universe, and you don't really know shit, but you think you do. And so you have a lot of people who are like, I'm a reincarnation of so and so and whatnot, and so I'm an old soul despite I'm 15 years old. And, you hear a lot of different things. There's a lot of reasons why people find themselves flocking into the community. And sometimes they're legit, and other times they're just looking for something to give substance to their lives.
For me, I never heard of psychic vampirism at all, ever. I lived almost 30 years of my life without knowing what it is. Everything I've known or been taught or had around me or friends were all sayings. I've never, ever heard of it until I got onto the online community. And because I happened to move up into a very northern area, and I was like, I miss my friends, so I'm going to try to find other friends. And that's when I found out that there's people out there that believe in the metaphysical world and energy systems and stuff like that. And I'm not against other people having beliefs and be believing in these things. It's just no different than me accepting my mother for being Roman Catholic. Um, so for me, I don't know how long the Psys have been engaged in the online world of things, but in my personal life, I've never met one.
Psychic vampirism, as it were, I think is very appealing to a lot of people because it allows them to take on an identity and a lifestyle with virtually no actual risk involved. A
It's all a
person can
fantasy,
say,
right?
I'm taking energy, I am a psychic vampire now. And
Yeah, like you get to
with this
indulge
comes
yourself.
with all this other ancillary lifestyle things. And so, it's attractive to people because there's nothing there to measure. There's nothing there to prove them right or wrong. It's just I feel as though I took energy from someone, and because of that, it's to them it might feel real because it's in their head. We don't believe in the psychic energy exists. Period. We don't believe in souls or gods or any of that stuff.
Unless you can prove to me God exists, then sure, I'll start believing. But I'm
That
pretty
makes
sure
total
God.
sense. And the psychic
But if God
vampire
wanted
thing,
to
is
kill
that
me.
existed as long as because I mean you're talking about the communities, the sub communities you were involved in the '90s. Like they did actually revolve around actually consuming blood, correct? They weren't like when did the sort of fantastical
That was a
element, or
part
was
of
that
it. I
always a
mean, I
mix?
think there was still psychic vampirism shit and mystics and vampire religion type people.
Like has there always
But
sort of been a mix of kind of like what you're saying, these
Well,
people
you
who
still have
like
the
don't have to do
occultism.
any work, sort of like the people that are kind of involved for what they can just talk about versus what they're like. Because you guys are unironically taking a risk every time you engage in the practice you're engaging in. There's a level of risk there. That's a level of trust.
well,
Whereas
here's the
what they're
big thing
they're just talking.
that's difficult for a lot of people. A lot of people find themselves in internet communities, and I'm saying internet communities to cover all grounds because the internet allows us to socialize without leaving the security of our home. And many people have anxiety issues, right? They are active in a community, but when they were to be taken outside of their internet bubble and put in the actual real world, they would be socially awkward. They would lack the people skills to actually convince a stranger to trust them enough to be able to put a needle in them. All right. And because of the necessity to translate your interpersonal skills into the real world, develop friends, and develop very strong bonds of trust with people, that in a fairly rapid succession, this is a set of skills that a lot of people struggle with, I think.
Right. Which is why I don't like when that one person was saying, well, people like to cut and there's that sensuality with things. And like what Jamie was saying, if it was possible, like if she had no other donors, that and that have making it a little bit more sensual for the surface feed, she would do it if she had no donors. And I think a lot of people that maybe lack these social skills, and that's why I don't bash on people that take a lot less but still actively take. Um, like I know there's a few other names that I could, but I'm not going to throw out. Uh, they do service feedings, and it has a high potential to be sexual. And if that is the only way that they're getting donors, they might be giving off or exchanging it for, especially if it's a clean donor, exchanging it for that sensuality with that partner.
Yeah, like I can see that being a big issue to it of like people who like are looking as like being in because it almost seems like the donor's actually in the power position. Like weirdly enough, it's like if you find out about this
Oh,
community
they
and like
can
it's
be.
like they can almost target you guys, right? Like if I show up at the meetings,
It
like you.
goes both ways. It depends on the mental fortitude of that person. All right. And
Okay,
what I mean by that is,
if they're vulnerable
if
or
you
not.
have a donor that feels that they can put themselves and is psychologically able to maneuver themselves into a position where they can kind of extort you. Oh, you want this, I know you want this, so favors, okay? Or you're going to do this. On the flip side, you can have a person who's, the taker, and they too might have a donor that feels incomplete without that person. This is just like any human relationship. Between the two people, they can find their power balance, and if it's malaligned, can turn into an abusive environment.
Like for me, I had my one of my exes. Her name was Holly, and she's the one that wanted me to slowly take from her, but I'm one that takes enough that one person is usually not ideal. But so if I was to come home, she would take my stock and take it out of the fridge and lock it in her chest, lock it in her car, and basically spoil it. Because if it's left out of a controlled at 5 Celsius, blood spoils really fast. And so she would deliberately uh, sabotage my other friends' gifts, and that turned
Oh.
destructive really fast.
Okay, I thought you were saying she was destroying her own stuff, but what she was doing is destroying the other donor stuff, so you'd have to take hers. Interesting. And that's like what I was thinking, like in terms of the power dynamic. It's like I feel
Well,
like
I
people
had
look
to
at
I
your
had to leave
community.
that relationship because I don't want to hurt her. Obviously, I still have fond memories of her, but I don't want to hurt her. And so the fact that she's willing to do that and hurt and sabotage my friends' gifts, I couldn't keep that kind of variable and keep her safe and everybody else in a comfortable space.
And it's like, I mean, straight up, it's like she's also, I mean, not only is she like disrespecting you and the other person's gift, but she's also like just putting herself in danger because like she's not supposed to give that much blood, right? Like, I mean, you're doing it out of concern for her. You're like, I need X amount of blood. If you give me that amount of blood, you're not going to be as healthy as you should be, right? Like, it's not like you're kind of being altruistic. You're like, if you were my sole donor, it would not be healthy for you. So I don't want to put you through that. And then it's like she's basically like,
Yeah, so
I'm going to
I had
disrespect
to
you.
cut the ties for that one.
Well, that makes total sense because that seems like that
How
seems like
is
an
a-
abusive relationship behavior, regardless if you drink blood. Like if that was just something your friend
But
had
then
given you.
let's say I
you'd be
was
like,
one of the VC members, the vampire community members that has a lot of social anxiety, and I don't have a lot of availability, and I put limitations, or I feel like I compound with limitations, like I can't travel an hour outside to make a new friend or find a new partner, and she's the only one that's there, and eventually I kill off all the contacts because they find out that the blood got spoiled, and they're like, well, why am I giving you the blood, because you're constantly spoiling it, and she becomes the sole supplier. uh, I feel a lot of people would just try to reduce how much they take and then stay in that comfort zone with that one partner because it would be easier than to go out and find more.
hmm. So I guess like, do you ever see yourselves stopping drinking blood? Like I mean, now that you're engaged in this lifestyle full time, you see the benefits of it. It's like something that you're gonna currently like. I guess if you're looking for a long-term partner to get married, like, would you expect
Well, I
that they would be
mean,
your donor and be okay with the risk of it? Like, is there because there's kind of a long-term implication to it? Like, it seems like servicing the habit
well, no,
itself.
we would
Like,
just have to continuously find donors through the rest of our lives.
but then if let's say you got married, like there'd be a level of trust there, sort of like that if my partner for the rest of my because it's not a sexual thing, but it's still that people's
That's
blood
part of
is
the relationship. It's agreed upon, or you don't have a relationship.
okay. So I mean, in terms of have you had people
It's
who are
it's
not
not like,
donors
yeah.
or are not or like
If my partner is going to be is not comfortable with me having donors, they're not a good partner for me.
okay. So I mean, so, do you ever meet people who are like indifferent to it, or that like it just slowly becomes an issue when it isn't at the start? They're like, oh, that's totally fine, and then like as you get more and more serious, they're like,
That can happen with anything. I mean, that could be you going out with your boys. She's fine with it, and then later on, she's like, "Well, is there girls there? Or could that become a problem later on down the line?" That's not exclusive to our situation. That is the trust relation, the dynamics that exist in all relationships.
okay, no, that's fair enough. I guess I more just meant like in terms of because it just feels to me that it's like the risk of it. It's like you're okay with it, like when
Oh,
you're young, and
because
then you start.
of course.
Yeah, it's
I
just
mean,
like it's the
that's
trust
definitely.
of the other people. That's always my issue. It's like because I would trust you that you'd be getting donors and
Are
you're
you
vetting them.
potentially getting yourself? Well, in that case, then you would be getting tested too to show to them that you know that you're safe because you know you've exposed yourself to these things.
Yeah, oh,
It's
absolutely.
sort of like
But it's
working at a nuclear lab. You wear a badge because you have to figure out how much dosing you're getting.
yeah, it just seems like such like I guess that's my thing. I'm not trusting it. I mean, obviously you're vetting these people in a way that you feel is completely like, adequate, that you're not worried about yourself. But damn, I'm just like people are just such like pieces of shit. I feel like, and if someone it's their fetish to give me
If you
blood,
were in
and
a
they're
position, if you were in a position to debate whether or not it's safe to do or it's right for you, you probably don't need to do it.
yeah,
And
no, I
you
mean,
shouldn't do
yeah.
it.
Well, it needs to be more like about meeting someone who is into it and then trying to look past it, just in the sense of like, because it's not like it's like it's fine. It's like I said, I'd be like fine if I was like dating someone, I found out they did that, and we're always using condoms and stuff. I wouldn't be too worried. But the idea that like a long term relationship, I didn't be like, oh damn, like this is something really important to this person's lifestyle, but but it implies that like these other people are completely trustworthy with their actions, and then like it kind of makes the relationship like you, that person, then all of their donors. And if you move around, or if their donors move and like they're changing donors, it's almost like your partner has other partners. Like they don't, but they sort of
I
do.
mean, if you can find a partner who is sang, that would be helpful because then you're both doing the same thing.
And I guess that's
You
what
know,
you're in the community for, that because you do want to meet other like-minded people that are that yeah, just
it's
don't even
it's
consider what
difficult.
you're doing.
It's very difficult. It's a lonely life because there's not a whole lot of people who do it. It's not easily understood. It still is very gross to a lot of people. It's very scary and strange to a lot of people. These are things we're well aware of. So it's not like we're, thinking, hey, everyone's crazy because they don't. We know that this is definitely something that is. It has to
High
be,
risk
you have to
in a
approach
lot
it
of
with
respects.
caution. How do you deal with people? If you have a good friend, and you're like, I would like to be forthright with that, my friend. I would like to be able to tell them the truth. You're still asking yourself, is that going to result in a negative outcome? It's kind of like coming out of the closet, and is that gonna turn into a lost friend, or is it gonna turn into a stronger friendship? We don't really know.
Like friendship not too long ago that her name was Shivani, and she was East Indian, and she was a potential donor, and she liked to associate, separate it, be like, there's the spooky that I find is the friendly spooky, and then there's the spooky spooky. So she associated the more blood side with the spooky spooky, but I tried to affirm to her, I'm like, there's no difference. It's me as one package. It's just I either choose not to let a lot of friends know one thing or not, and it's based on their comfort levels. And usually when navigating those conversations, you can like drop lines about, let's say, if which the vampirism happens to be video games, and video games are taboo, you could just like make lewd jokes at Mario Party or whatever, and then eventually if those people pick up on it and start adding to it and be like, yeah, totally, I know what you're talking about, and you can eventually build that to a conversation where they're like, hey, and they come up to you with, and they ask the right question, they're like, do you do this? And that's when usually I will say yes, and then I'll answer any usually concerns or questions that they have at that point.
It's not an easy task, and there's no formula to that you can fall back on,
Mm-hmm.
and everything is a risk. You figure, is this the right time? Is this gonna work? You really don't know.
Yeah, I imagine the reactions are all so different as well because people are just, it's such a unique thing. Someone in the chat saying, so it's like this is the person who seems to know about sayings. It's like, so guests have nothing against going, quote, Kitra, Kitra, in quotes. Do you guys know what that is?
I'm not familiar with that term.
Shadow, if you just want to like type in the chat what Kitra is, that'd be dope. So I'm not sure what that is.
Is it an acronym?
I guess
If
I
it
can
was,
just
it's
Google
an
it.
acronym.
The Kitra of the vampire community.
Did you say the Kitra?
Yeah,
Or teacher.
Kitra or Kitra, Kitra.
I've never heard of that term.
Yeah, this seems like a. I
Can
think
they
I just found like
explain
I
what
think
it
I just
is?
found an erotica, so I don't actually know if this is like. Yeah, I don't know if I'm. Yeah, let's see if they put it in the chat. Kitra is literally vampire drinking from other vamp. Oh, okay. Yeah, like what do you think of? I mean, would you two share?
Oh,
Would you?
would I do that? No, I don't
Oh, because
think
then you
that's
just
a
be losing,
wise thing to
right?
do.
Like, cause you drink to
In a
gain.
weird way.
So if you were
Again, it
giving
kind of
like,
goes back to that. Yeah. What if you're drinking blood because you feel that you may be lacking some nutritive value in your own blood? Why would you drink more blood of a person who may
Suffers the
suffer
same.
the same deficiency?
no, that makes total sense. It's like if you're in the
You're
same
not
community
gaining anything.
identifying for the same reasons, it's like you obviously wouldn't gain anything from each other because the reason you drink blood is to get that thing.
Some people who believe in energy and things like that may believe that a vampire or whatever possesses some mystic quality to their blood. I don't prescribe to any of that sort of mentality, so I don't think there's any
Or
significance to it.
or they might believe that the transferring of blood between the two is sensual, not that it's maybe sexual, but sensual, and that you're sharing something that unique with another person that you also consider your partner, so it could be in that light. But as for a nutritional or a sustaining point of view, no.
From the pragmatic point of view, as we see it, it has no value.
No, that makes total sense from like your actual perspective of it. Someone asked, do you ever share donors? Like if you found a donor, because you guys are obviously in the same area, because you're physically in the same location. Like, would you ever share?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes, we do.
Okay, interesting. So it's like, is there kind of a demand sort of deal where like the supply isn't enough in the area, or like
This is true.
there's like a
And
hierarchy?
so we do pool our donors. It doesn't really affect much because we use phlebotomy. We bottle the blood, and so we don't actually have to. We know when we meet up with the donor, an evening watching a movie, hanging out. We draw the blood, and then the night they go home, and then for the rest of the month, we just take bottles from the fridge or the tubes rather. So it's not like some weird moment that we have to. There's no ritual or personal effect afterwards. We're just consuming the blood from the tubes.
I think I think the most we do is like a little cheers, like as if it was like wine glasses of sorts. That's about it.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
there's
Yeah, yeah.
nothing gut weird. It's pretty boring, I suppose.
Boring.
Yeah.
J Pops just asked, can you draw more or less blood dependent on weight? Like, is it just all humans you can draw the exact same amount of blood, or do people's size matter? Like, if someone's really big, can you draw more blood, or is it just strictly like one human
The
can only
size
donate?
of the person is a strange thing. I have one of my donors was a very skinny man, but he could produce a massive amount of blood. But at the same time, I've had heavier people who could produce a good amount, and then times not so much. Or I think it entirely has to do with their own biology, like how robust their
Diet or
their yeah
exercise.
the circulatory system is, how hydrated they are, um, and things like that. Some people's veins simply just don't do well. They trickle down. They slow up after a short while. Others can flow better, longer. And so I haven't really found something where I can say I'm looking at a person and say, okay, that person,
Will
I'm
yield
going to
this
get
much.
400 mils from no problem at all. I mean, there's times I thought about it because they'd be easy to stick because their veins are prominent,
Mm-hmm.
but that's a technical issue and has nothing to do with actually how much blood they can produce.
Okay, so vascularity, it really isn't part of it either. Like, if someone's like, really muscular and vascular, you can see all their veins. That doesn't actually dictate, like, oh, they're going to give me a ton of blood. Like,
Yeah, because their veins could collapse on you. You could stick it in, and everything would just nope.
interesting. So you
It
guys
just
really
means
do
that
have a
they're
lot of like
easier to
expertise in like in understanding like in, like the drawing of blood thing. Like, I'm saying
we
you
have
guys aren't in the medical field at all, right? Like, you're not nurses. Or...
no, we aren't. We are not certified professionals,
Mhm.
and one of the one very important to do is to, when you have a new donor, is to explain that. You explain these things. You disclose that I'm not a doctor, okay?
Mhm.
And while I have learned, I am not. You're not in a lab. You're not at a hospital. There are inherent risks with what we do.
Mhm. Well, what's the
We
worst that could
disclaim
happen
these
to the
things so that
donor?
everyone has a well-educated decision.
The worst thing that could possibly happen, yeah, like I will always go for the median.
Mhm.
There's other veins you can go for, but there's a higher concentration of nerves in different sections,
Mhm.
and you are sending a cylindrical, sharp tube that does take out a piece of skin um, into their body, and you can do nerve damage. So
There is
Okay.
a risk of that can happen. I don't think
I've never heard of any cases of it, but it
it's
is a
not
risk.
something that's probably happening all the time because people get labs drawn all the time. And
Mhm.
how often have you had labs drawn where they did a shitty job and you had a big old bruise? And so you didn't, you the thing about it is we can take a lot longer to prepare for what we're doing than typically the nurses would because they're on a schedule. They have to see lots of people. They need to get you in and out, stick you, put a band-aid on you, and see the next person.
Mhm.
We can take a long time examining the area, making sure that you're well hydrated, that you're in a good position, your posture is good, your health is good. Hell, I can take a simple pinprick test and using a device not too unlike a glucose meter, check your hemoglobin levels to make sure that your blood is able to hydrate, but oxygenate properly.
Mhm.
I can test for these things to give me a fair understanding of where you are at that moment as far as your blood health. It's not exhaustive, of course, but we can do a fair amount of things to ensure that the donor's experience will be a positive one and not leave them in any way harmed from it. A good experience is a painless one.
Mm-hmm.
When they don't even feel it, they have a great time and they aren't left with a mark.
Yeah, because I was gonna say it felt like the donor really didn't have much risk, like compared to to you guys obviously consuming it. And just J Pop's in the chat asking like strictly donos or would you pay for blood? I know you guys said that like you'd had paid for blood before, you'd never Jamie, and that like I mean if worst case came to it, you would pay for blood, right? Like if there was just for some reason absolutely
If I had to
everyone in
pay
the
for someone,
community
yeah, I
disappeared,
mean, you can do that. I don't really recommend it because usually at that point, it's well. Here's a couple problems or difficulties you encounter with paying for blood. One, your relationship with the person may not be that great
yeah,
because
because they're not willing to do the favor for you. It's kind of like
and,
what?
and and secondly, there's this matter of okay, I have to send them out for blood labs, so now they have to go out, get screened, and depending on how fast the labs can turn around and give me their results, do I trust that this person hasn't done anything in between? Right, they're already willing to sell their blood for money to me.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a
What
person
else are
that
they
I'm?
willing to sell
Is this
for
is this the
money?
kind of person that I feel that I'm going to trust that is a
Perfect.
good person to be working with here effectively? I mean,
Yeah.
we're looking at this purely from a transactional point of view.
100%,
Is
yeah.
this
Like, are they
yeah?
a drug addict? That's why they're selling me their blood because they have no other way to get income. And this is, yeah. I mean, someone in the chat, literally, their next question was like, do you ask for medical info or do you just base it on trust? So you 100% screen everybody through an actual, you get the
You
Yes,
lab.
to screen
really,
them.
you
Okay,
really
that's really good to know
screen.
because I was like, that's my thing with the whole trusting people. It's like, I feel like people will be like, oh, yeah, no, I'm definitely not doing intravenous drugs. I'm not doing this. Sure, I'll give you the blood because that's like, they're into giving you blood. But you have to trust, but you're literally like, you're getting a lab and then like, unless they're, within that period of time getting tainted again, boom, this person's
You
actually good
have
to
to
go.
do your due diligence. It's your life on the line,
Oh, okay. That I mean, that
and
obviously we assumed that
you
there
can
was due diligence,
totally
but
you can choose to not do it. That's your choice, and you can accept the risk of doing it.
and are there
That's
people
your
in the
choice
community
as an
that would
adult.
actually do
But I
that?
wouldn't recommend it.
Because that's like
There are
that was my
people who
big
do all
concern
kinds of
when
things.
I heard about this. I was just like, how on earth could you like have such confidence in the blood? But now I know why. Because you're like waiting the week or whatever it takes to get the
There are
lab
people
results.
who don't care. There are people who like living on the edge. You said you used a lot of drugs. You certainly have experienced people who do things for the thrill of it. And people, yes, are there people out there in in the community who make dangerous choices, who make careless choices? Of course, but you need to make every effort you can to not be part of that, to help usher a culture of responsibility and accountability to yourself and to your donors.
Well, like most teenagers, they believe that they're invincible. They can take on the world, and nothing can hurt them. And they don't realize how fragile and how easy the systems of organelles can shut down on them. And so, as from the pragmatic Sanguivore part, I like to make sure that there's a lot of that upfront educational. Like this is the risk. These are the safety precautions. These are the things you do to make sure that everything's sterile, everything's clean, everything's safe, not only for you but for your donor as well. Like it has to be that mutual thing. And because I know that people are going to go out there, they're going to be reckless. They're going to, if they're craving blood, they're going to cut somebody. They're going to try to extract that. And if they do it improperly, they can hurt themselves or somebody else. And I'd rather have them be educated at the forefront.
One of the things I just want to throw in there because I know some people who may have had some medical experience would say, how can you be sterile? You don't have an autoclave. And um, all the equipment we're using is single use and disposed of appropriately in a sharps container and biohazard bags and things like that upon use. So we don't reuse
Any equipment.
anything that could potentially uh, transfer a contaminant onto a donor like that.
Yeah, I mean that it seems like you guys do everything very medically sound, like which is obviously extremely important. I mean that was definitely my biggest concern when I first heard about this. I was like, just how can you possibly be like convinced? But now when you hear about the process, so it's like I guess in the community, do you not kind of like look at the other members that don't take that aspect seriously and just like because I mean it's like in the pragmatic sanguivore community, do you actually have other people who take it much less seriously, like the cleanliness, the
There
process?
are But the problem is and that's why we made it our own little friends group, is that a lot of them, because there's a lot of spiritualism and divinity and that kind of thing going on, it's very taboo, or they'll call you some kind of elitist or whatnot, or Nazi, for putting standards and ground levels where this is the safe zone. And to them, they want to be able to just float around wherever they'd like. And if you put those boundaries, they don't like those boundaries. They're in that space because they don't want the boundaries.
The standard practice within the community, by and large, is whatever a person says that they are,
They are.
you don't challenge them on that. And while in a part of me says live and let live is a great policy, I feel in the same way it's also a strange environment which can have some harmful effects. If there are people who are truly mentally unwell, delusional, suffering issues which have caused them a disconnect with the world around them and themselves, um, an environment like that is akin to trying to get treatment for alcoholism at a bar that serves free drinks.
Mm-hmm.
You
Absolutely.
you're in an environment now that says anything you say is good and no one's challenging you, and in fact encourages you.
Exactly.
This is fuel on the fire. Now, is this everyone? I don't believe so. I think there's a lot of really well adjusted and really good people there who call themselves size and other things like that, that I have a good relationship with because we know how each other feel about things, and
Mm-hmm.
we're okay about that.
And you can
Okay, it's
respect
like,
it.
yeah, I was like, I know you know that I'm not really a big subscriber to your thing, but you're pretty cool.
We can still be friends on a
You
lot of other
know,
levels.
but we did mention a few of those things, and that's very very taboo to say. If you're in an environment that is really based around your identity is whatever you say it is, and then you come in and you say, well, I think we should think about that. You're challenging the very
Glue of
fabric, yeah, that holds it together. It's that's difficult, and with most people claiming to be size and things like that, if you're saying that psychic phenomenon doesn't even exist, you're telling them, I challenge your identity.
well,
And
they also take it like a challenge, because I understand that a lot of theists and atheists argue and debate a lot, and it's no matter what, atheism is still a belief system. You believe that there is nothing, and I am okay with that. I think that people get to the point where everyone in the life. So let's say you, Skida, are a psychic vampire. Everybody in your life, if you try to then say, I am going to go and drain, can I drain your energy? A lot of people are going to laugh at you. And so they get a lot of this ridicule in their everyday lives where they feel like they need this on a spiritual level, and they don't, people just, society just constantly clashes down on them. So when they're in these environments in the vampire community, it's their space where they can be who they believe they are and think that they are, and without any chastisation. So when we come in and we say that we are atheists and we like science and we're skeptics, that is everything that they have been taught to be fearful of. And so I've noticed that they are very scared of communicating with us, even though I'm perfectly fine with them believing whatever they want.
is there any more questions from the audience?
No, it doesn't look like the audience is like someone's saying, they're saying, "Oh, you guys are the most reasonable." Someone's saying they're gonna drink blood from now on. Yeah, there's someone talking about the metaphysics argument. Like, I mean, it sort of seems like most people are on the same page that you guys just have like a completely reasonable outlook. But then, like, I just kind of have a question that, like, isn't there like kind of a bit of an obligation in these, like, because you're basically saying it's an echo chamber for people with a bit of mental illness at some point, because like, there's not a, you can't question people on the validity of what they're saying. Like, there's a level of validity in what you guys are saying that you allow us to question. It's like, why are you doing this? Oh, because I have an effect from it. It's giving me X, Y, and Z benefits. How do you protect yourself? Oh, I do these procedures. Like, you literally can answer everything you're saying with like a completely reasonable
And to
response.
top this off, I will also tell someone I don't have all of the evidence to back up why I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I maintain that there exists the possibility it is entirely in my head. But at no time am I going to explain this by saying I am an evolved creature and that I am absorbing energy and things like this, because these are concepts that I cannot support. They aren't backed by anything provable, reproducible in lab, or common science. And because of that, I can't make claims that are untestable.
I like to have dignity and substantiability to my words, and if I can't feel that I can put the backing behind it, I have no foundation to stand on. I might as well be in no house at all.
That was sort of my question. It's kind of like some of these communities, we sort of see the same thing where there's like a lot of level of people, like even in the flat Earth communities, like some of them could kind of like they had more of a scientific background. They had like reasons at least that they believe why certain studies are wrong or why NASA's lying, etc. But they're trying to come at it from a scientific perspective, and they have the same thing in their community where there's the sphere Earth. There's like all these different Earthers. Like they believe in like there's like the concave Earth and the hollow Earth and all this shit. And they're like basically saying how they are coming from a scientific perspective for why the Earth is flat, and then all these other people are crazy, mentally ill weirdos who are kind of part of their movement in a certain sense. And it's like, and they would openly say that, but they don't distance themselves from that. And I sort of feel like for yourselves, it's like when you're in these communities where kind of people join up, you know, they're bringing in like you said, like as a vampire movie comes out, more youth joins. Don't you sort of feel a responsibility to kind of like almost shepherd in the new people, and when people are coming in as I'm a psi vampire, and kind of like sit them down and
There's another aspect besides simply offering an echo chamber. Within any community, this community, all communities you've ever experienced in your experience online, there's microcosms within that, groups of people that are given senses of authority, people who listen to others, places people go. People want to feel they have value, and within the community, like the vampire community, which is very niche, there aren't a lot of outlets. So when people can create a community, be it a chat room, a web page, or something like that, and people begin to listen to them, it gives them the sense of affirmation. It gives them the sense that they are important in some aspect. It lets them feel as though they're not crazy. They're right. They're doing the right thing and they have value. So because that leadership thing, it is there's a lot of politics we talked about earlier that exists there too. If you upset that balance, you're telling them that that little bubble, that little boat that they're
You
floating on
have
with the
little
people who
likes and
listen to them,
hearts.
that they should question that. You're definitely causing them an issue.
but isn't that a good thing? Like, I just feel like some of these cases, like, you have to kind of, you know, play the bad guy in a certain sense when you're coming at it from an
You
actual
can
reasonable
try,
perspective.
and that's
Like,
what we try to do. If you try to say that, you can be saying, I'm going at this from the good intention of, I want people to be healthy, I want a healthier environment. But the thing is that when the bulk of the community needs that affirmation, needs to feel as though that their beliefs are founded and other people will follow along with them, they don't want to be told to stop and think.
This is their space where they can feel whatever they want to.
Yeah,
They'll
it's
claw at you and scream at you for trying to destroy their escapism.
right. They don't want you. So you are definitely pissing in their pool when you do that.
yeah. Do you feel like it's sort of like tourism though? Like they're almost like tourists in your subculture because you're taking part in it for a specific reason. People kind of
I don't feel like it's my subculture because the thing about it is that our group is very young, respectively. Though blood drinkers have been around a long time, the pragmatics are for a young group. We're not even a full year old, and we're just a part of a larger group of people who've been involved in some cases pre-internet, depending on how old they are. And so they have with them this implied
Reverence.
seniority, as I have been involved in the community since, XYZ date, and I've been doing things and involved. I've written books and whatnot. Um, and so you might think you know what you're talking about, Jamie, but I've been involved in this community a lot longer. So, we're kind of like we're not given the voice, but we're also a very small part of that community. There's not a whole lot of serious blood drinkers, and because of that, we don't have a loud voice. We don't have a lot of clout. We don't get that because
like you're
if
completely overshadowed
we're
by
a
like
fringe
the.
group.
Well, also, we're not looking for that affirmation, or at least I'm not. I don't know about. I can't speak for Jamie, but I'm not looking for that. My care for the community, because a lot of the community members, when they when certain things came into play, they're like, well, why do you even care about the community? And I care about the health of the people and the health of the social health and the physical health of the community. I'd rather people be safe and be able to trust each other and have that the comfort rather than everything just be based on fairy tales and lies, and have that foundation right at the forefront. That's where I come from, the caring part.
Okay, I see someone in the chat was asking like, why don't you just hunt for animals? Like, I mean, I guess assuming you.
There are some people who do
Some
that.
people do that. Some people do go for animal. In my experience, I don't. There's a lot of folks, I think, on a consensus feel that animal blood, while is good, is not as good. I don't know why that would be. I guess the possibility is that human blood is very very between humans our blood composition is comparable in most ways, and so as far as compatibility, as far as whatever components are within that blood that might be beneficial to us, we're likely to find it in humans more in greater concentration than we would in animal.
Well, it's
I
like what
don't
I
know.
said at the beginning of the podcast, is that animals, the livestock, are set on a strict diet. They don't have access like we do to the supermarket, where we can get every single vitamin A, B, C. If we can't get it in a vegetable, we can get it in a pill format. We can literally healthily take in anything we want into our bodies to balance out our everything. An animal in captivity or the wild doesn't have that luxury.
Yeah, and furthermore, if you don't have access to like a veterinarian to examine the animals on a regular basis, you do potentially have more risk for like parasites and other problems that could be present in that blood, which is a whole different kind of problems that you might experience. And so, yeah, people do, but it's definitely a different route.
Like, do
In my
some people
experience,
raise livestock to
yes,
Yeah,
harvest
I
blood
was
from
gonna say
like
my
some people
grandmother used
raise
to.
rabbits and stuff.
My
but
grandmother
for
used to raise
blood,
chickens
really?
and rabbits for that.
Really? Oh, so your whole family, your family line is basically people that have drank blood for.
Oh yeah, for me it's not something and that's one thing I thought was really weird, because I was watching a shaman video on how shamanism is treated in different cultures.
Mhm.
And let's say, Skida, we're in Indonesia and you said you had a vision of going up to this water and you talked with somebody. In those kind of like tribal things areas, or in Asian, you would be considered like a seer or shaman, and you would be sent to somebody to go and hone in on that skill. And in Western culture, we would call you a schizophrenic, or that you're delusionary and all this other stuff. So there's a lot of negative points onto that. And so for me, with my family, it was more like that positive affirmation with like that kind of healthy shamanism, where we don't look at you as a negative. We build you up and we teach you the nice and proper ways. And it's not like the Western side where they crush you down. And so I feel like a lot of sayings, I haven't experienced a lot of their struggle, and where they're like feeling that society is going to be like negative and terrible to them, or they feel like they're monsters for
So
what they do.
to summarize, you are not a shaman, and this wasn't
No,
treated with a religious aspect,
I
and
like to make large, beautiful illustrations.
there wasn't the stigma
I didn't have that
associated that a lot of
negative.
people dealt with.
Yeah,
It's kind of like if you're, if you live in a family and you come out as gay, but your uncle was gay and your dad and stuff, they all know it, and it's
it's
easier for them
completely
to
fine.
deal with because they've experienced it before.
Mhm.
So the stigma at home wasn't as much.
It's just so interesting that it's like a multi generational thing, like that. Like that, it's like it's not just like because it does sort of feel like a niche thing that you get into like through the. I'm really curious about like what it was like back in the '90s though, when the internet was so not prevalent. Like what was that like for you, Jamie, in terms of like finding the community? Was it done through like newspaper ad? Like it just seems like the
Back
internet made
then,
things so easy. Like what a struggle it must have been
like
to
in
like connect.
'93, I think the internet was weird. The web, as we use it now, didn't really properly exist. So we were using things like Prodigy and other groups like that. They had their own internal like communication between people, and you'd sort of find people, or you'd use Usenet, and it was really disjointed. Um, Maybe you might use a bulletin board system, a BBS system that you would dial into. Those go back into the '80s, but you know, it's it was very hard hit or miss. And one of the things also back then was that the prevalence of role playing, and I'm talking serious role playing. We're talking about people like, I am a 5,000-year-old count and something or other, and I'm just people who make outrageous claims like that. You'd see that a lot. I mean, you'd see a lot, and that continued well into the early 2000s. And at some point, a little bit later there, I started seeing a shift from that into more of the groups of the size and the religious ways. It was going less to from the extreme fantasy and more into the spiritual aspect and retooling of what we would call vampirism.
I got a question actually about like because you said
I would say
'93. Like,
modern
when did
vampirism.
it was like that movie Interview with a Vampire? Did that like spark a huge like like because you kind of sort of mentioned like media's involvement in like kind of spurring the community
Well,
forward? Like,
I
because
would
'93
say
is like
that
around when that movie came out, I think, right? That was like a pretty popular movie.
the interview was influential with a lot of people because
Especially with the 5,000-year-old count. That's just kind of what brought to my mind. I was like, oh
it,
yeah,
it, it,
like the
it
idea of
fit the bill for a lot of people. Again, we're dealing with a highly sexualized character, a set of characters,
yeah, for sure.
a very high visual kind of character. We got that kind of Victorian look. We have all of this
The
interesting
beauty.
goings on going on, and one of the things again I mentioned this before about vampires that appeal to people is that they hit on a lot of the things that human beings have always fantasized: power, influence, and
Immortality.
in immortality and beauty, and all of these things that creature has in folklore. And so it's very appealing to people because it allows people to have all of these things in one. And people want power because we feel powerless in life.
But then they also love Louis because then they get to see the thing that they covet so hard suffering. And a lot of them will also relate to Louis because, oh, the humanity, I can't dare drink a drop.
Yeah, that's another trope I see in film and literature, where you'll have this a character that has the thing that the reader wants. Everyone who's reading Interview with a Vampire, generally speaking, fantasizes, God, it'd be cool to be a vampire like that. But they're reading about this main character who's quite upset about the situation. They're very unhappy about being a vampire. So in one way I think it's something kind of like where we say we tell ourselves money won't buy ourselves happiness, right? It's like, oh God, if I won the lottery, think of all the trouble. It'd be a real pain in the ass. We tell ourselves that the thing we want wouldn't be as good as what we want it to be to somehow kind of make us feel better. And I think characters like Louis did that for people. Lestat is who they really wanted to be, but they empathized with Louis because Louis was sort of like the thing they could say, well, reality is I'm never going to be a vampire, and look how unhappy he is.
Yeah, grass
So
is
I think
always
that's,
greener type mentality. Like, oh yeah, like it's not actually things aren't actually greener being the vampire. So you'd rather empathize with that character because it allows you to kind of accept that
but yeah, I
you're not
definitely
gonna
was
be
a
Lestat. But I just feel
the
like that
whole
that movie
New
just sort of lines
Orleans.
it kind of lines up with the timeline of you saying oh '93, and I just feel like oh that movie probably did create a large
Well, the
message
New
boards probably
Orleans
popped off.
Vampire Association, the whole thing, that's still
Nova?
popular. Well, they're okay. I like Nova, but they're still a big deal today. I mean, there's a whole tourist interest in going to places like New Orleans for vampire related interest, and people go there regularly. Personally, um, I'm a kind of a gothic person myself. It's not necessarily related to the vampirism, just my personal style. But I personally find that going to a swamp would be very, very sweltering and nasty, and I can't understand why people would really want to do that. But because sweating my ass off does not sound like fun. But yeah, there's a big deal then. There's groups down there, and I know people who are part of that. And
Oh, nice.
I like some of these people because I find them to be very they're just cool folk,
Mm-hmm.
and they never give me a reason to have a problem with them. They understand how I feel, but again, we have that mutual thing where it's like, okay, we can agree to disagree. Well, what's the next thing we're going to discuss? We're cool like that. That's, I feel, the adult way to approach it.
Would you say those people are more about the fantasy of it, like the fact that they want to do it specifically in New Orleans and probably like
Oh
they
hell yes, there's people down there who make things, and they go
Well,
down
you
there.
have parties down there and all kinds of different groups. And a lot of there's one main organizer down there that even runs things to help the homeless and stuff like that. So that's not they're not terrible people. They're actually really nice people.
Oh, I don't doubt it.
If you are there, I'd say go and meet them.
So I feel like most people in very niche things are end up being nice people because when you have a super specific interest, you sort of have like kind of like a cognizance towards like your community or like, oh,
well,
like I'm
also
trying
you
to
have
build
to be
up.
really
Like,
nice people. If you're not nice, you're not going to keep donors.
true, yeah, I can imagine that. It's like, so is there? Can you maybe just talk about the other types of vampire community? Because I almost feel like there's like a sexual vampire community that's involved with the fangs,
There
the
is.
fang
There are
smiths.
people who are there, like we said, the psychic vampires, the energy vampires, the people who deal with the non-physical aspect of things. You will find this is in great one of the areas we debate the most, but they make up a large percentage. And from that, you're going to have people who are approaching the vampirism from a religious point of view.
Really,
And that
cults.
we're talking about things like
Like
it could be
theistically being vampires.
theistic, yeah, in one semblance or another. There's lots of different ways that can be broken down, but that's for some that's an aspect of the religious approach that they've taken. Others have the belief that they are something special entirely, that they are the physical inhabitation of some sort of spectral thing.
Or we get that's where we get the other kin that kind of come into the community a bunch, and this is where it overlaps a bit, is where we'll have people who will believe that they have the spirit or the embodiment of a vampire inside them, and that's what makes them a vampire.
Some people, yeah,
The
the
vampire
strangest thing I ever
spirit.
saw once was someone who called themselves a ficto,
Sexual.
a fictosexual kin of some sort.
What does
Basically,
that mean?
they felt that
It
they
means
felt that within them resided the spirit of a fictitious character from the television show, What We Do in the Shadows.
Oh,
And
amazing.
so they
that character
felt that,
lived in their head.
yes, that somehow this fictitious character possessed a spiritual entity, and that was within them somewhere, and that because inside of them was
A vampire
A
a vampire
fictitious
from
character.
character
from a fiction work,
Amazing.
that
that they were, yeah, that's it was very, that was
Uh,
that was like so,
That's ridiculous. Like, I mean, I
that
definitely,
that that
I
was
think
that
that
was
is
a
a
tipping
thing.
point.
People who sexually identify as anime characters, like unironic, like not a meme. They actually like, oh, I'm like, I'm some anime character. But oh, sorry, I had a question to ask on that. I
that is a
completely
very
went
very
blank.
fringe group. If that's another one you want to go and look
There's
into.
a
No, I
lot
was
of
thinking
different.
like I
The
was thinking they would be a
fictosexual.
vampire bat otherkin. Like, oh, my inner animal is a vampire bat, so I need to drink blood, so I'm a sanguivore. That's what I was thinking.
I haven't met any of those.
I was like, because
There's
that
a
would make
lot of
sense
people
to
who
me as a
believe
crossover.
themselves to be any number of different types of animals, dragons, fairy, you name it, all kinds of things, both fictional and
Well,
real. And they believe themselves. This is where I don't quite understand why the other kin
and Therians are.
community kind of has merged with that, but that's another philosophy.
Well,
We
just
don't
like we
believe
get
in.
eclectic religions, people in the vampire community believe that you can be more than one thing, and so you can have a vampire fairy, you can have a vampire dragon.
Or a werewolf.
Oh,
That's awesome.
okay. Like, see,
So
it's funny
that's where
that,
this crazy overlap starts happening. And for me, I like to keep that foundation of trust, and I feel like this meddles the water. I'm totally cool with you
100%.
identifying with whatever you want, but we need to be able to respect this foreground. Like I still have donors that I have to make sure that they feel earnestly safe with me, and that doesn't that is almost a mockery in some ways I find, and I don't want to be rude to them, but
No, it's 100%. That's like kind of the issue. I was like, even like when we're speaking to the people from the incel community, it's sort of like, don't you feel that these people in you are super radicalized in your community? Like that you need to like kind of take a stand against them. Like if you're all identifying as people who aren't going to get laid because of X, Y, and Z, at least take a stand against the people that are radicalized and are like kill all women, all this shit. It's sort of like you're in this community and you guys have such a pragmatic approach, and then these people are just going off and like saying like what you're saying, like, oh, I'm a dragon fairy vampire. You're like, okay, come on, we're trying to have like an honest
well, the
discussion
problem
about what
is
we
that
actually understand.
again, but again with the support thing and within a Discord environment, like yes, we have the Facebook ones and whatnot, and a lot of people make alternate accounts and stuff, but you're still dealing with somebody that's on the other side of the screen. And yes, we can dehumanize people through text and just you're just a pink unicorn to me right now, um, but you're still a person, and we can't take away that's still another human being on the other side, no matter what they decide to claim. If I tear apart their identity. I am not in a position where I can make sure that they are in a safe spot when they log off. And if I tear that down, that's something. If they, especially if it's a dragon, that might be the identity inside them that gives them power, makes them feel that they can do the things that they can do throughout the day. And if I disable that, I'm crippling them, and that's cruel because then I don't know if they have somebody that they can trust on the other side of that Ethernet wire that can bring them back up.
Okay, see, I understand that, but it's more like it's. I don't think you should chastise them for the belief or their feeling. It's more the idea that them being in your community and trying to represent themselves as part of it. It's more like that. It's not saying like you need to stop
Well,
acting this way. It's more like can you stop representing yourself as one of us when in reality you are
I can
something.
do.
it's hard to do that when so much of the community has accepted them. It puts us as outliers to say that that we disagree. So because we're so badly outnumbered, to say we disagree is virtually a moot point in the larger scheme because people will listen to that.
Okay, I guess at the end of the day, it's a losing fight for you guys in that Discord. I was in that Discord for like they kicked me out because I got angry at that Damien guy for being weird. But at the same, I mean, I was being rude to him as well. I deserved to be kicked. But it's like it was pretty clear in there that like there was way more side people, way more. Like, I'm assuming there's much more people that are into the more esoteric and out there ideas than there are people that are actually into the pragmatic nature of what you guys are into. So if you brought up an argument, nothing would happen. I agree with your mic lit up, but nothing came out.
Oh, I was just gonna say, what exactly do you agree with when it comes to
Oh, you're
drinking
roboting
blood?
super hard. Can you disconnect, reconnect? Your internet is bad.
Oh, okay.
I that's too bad. I heard
Oh, I think it's my
It's
internet.
fine for me.
All right.
It's my internet. It's like I gotta disconnect, reconnect.
I was just gonna ask, out of curiosity, what exactly do you agree with concerning the health benefits for drinking blood? I was here earlier, but I never really. I don't think anybody specifically like what. Is it
Sorry,
scientific?
I gotta stop.
Or is it...
Sorry, the audio is totally erect. I don't know what is going on. I'm like, it sounds like a robot.
um the benefits
What is going
are,
on?
I would like to say, on a general wellness. I don't have facts to prove that it has actual benefit. I can report that it has had a positive effect upon my life as long as I had a supply, both mentally and physically. I felt that I was in a healthier position. My tests, when I would go to the doctor, I'd have better physicals. Does that mean necessarily a direct
I fixed it. Oh,
correlation?
jeez, that was
I
ridiculous.
can't say 100%, but it appears to put me in a better place, and I feel healthier.
Hey, can you guys repeat that, guys? Sorry, I just like I don't know what happened. It like switched to like a mic, so it was pulling. Like, just sounded like I was in the Matrix or something. Now it's all clear again. I completely dismissed like all that pre. I don't know if they heard anything. That was it sounded terrible.
Not a problem. Go ahead, James.
It was just general wellness.
Do you have
I
any
know.
explanation other
Pardon.
than?
I'm sorry.
Do you have any? Do you have a theory? Do you think it may be esoteric?
My theory is based on the idea of treating blood in a similar way to a nutritional supplement. We're going to be talking about blood as a kind of what do you call it? Almost like it contains chemicals that our bodies might have a need for. Perhaps those chemicals exist other places where blood would be necessary. But
They're
blood
already broken down
seems to be a good source of those nutrients, of those particular substances. Purely chemical, nothing psychic, nothing magical.
But isn't blood mostly just protein and water?
But you have 255 elements that could be possibly present in blood, depending on the person's age, health, sex, pregnancy, all kinds of different factors. And blood is the main carrier for all nutrients that is broken down within your body and is sent through the central nervous system, circulatory system to feed your body and every cell in you, as well as deliver all hormones to your body. So there are other things that could be present in blood, and that's why I personally prefer not to cook blood, because the same reason why the Inuits never got scurvy. When you cook things, you destroy it, and I prefer to try not to destroy it. I find I have no effects when I cook blood.
So, what do you think it's made out of? Because supposedly, from what I'm reading, it just says that it's like without the water, it's mostly just 70% protein, and the 30% is just water and carbohydrates.
There's a lot of different components that make it up. Proteins cover a very wide range of tissues in the medical world. So, um, yes, proteins, but there's virtually limitless a number of types of proteins that exist in tissues that
Well,
can
I
be.
would just
I'm
say
not
that
a
like
scientist,
I would
but
just say that
I
like
would
you
tell you
could
there's something.
just take like a there's like supplement powder like protein supplement
We wouldn't
powders
know
and
which one it is, though. You see, I wouldn't know which component,
Or which
what
protein.
specific protein specifically is it we need. Maybe it's not a protein. Maybe it's a supplement, something else. Maybe it's something within. I don't know, and that's the thing. If we knew, we would have better answers. Until we don't,
But it's
until we
kind of
do, we can only
catch-22.
really use what seems to work.
But you find that the blood from different donors, it all still satisfies the same exact needs, correct? Like it's not like drinking someone's blood, it doesn't satisfy. Has that ever happened where you've had someone's blood and been like, oh, I still
No.
feel tired, I
No,
don't feel
I've
good.
never really had that problem. We don't
Okay.
need a whole lot.
No, somebody
Well, I've
actually
never
asked in the chat about hormones. Is that an issue? Like if someone's pregnant or like,
I will
guess that's
never
it.
take from. I will never take blood from someone who's pregnant. That's not fair. No, that's.
Oh, because it's from the baby. Okay, yeah, because you're like hurting the baby, I guess, yeah. Or is it because of the hormones?
It's just an
I just-
additional
it's-
risk that we don't need to take.
I do it on a more a moral and ethical standpoint. I know.
Okay. And there's like, and obviously like there's no other situations where like if someone's like on their period, I guess their hormones are different. Like like if someone's in menopause, like do you
Yes,
ever
I
take
mean,
into account like
people's-
hormones like in the blood? Like is that a thing?
I
Like if a
haven't
guy's
really looked too
taking
much at
testosterone or
hormones
something?
specifically, but I mean, there's lots of different things that can affect it. And so, since we don't know specifically what, we can only continue to try to do what works until we know better.
Like
Do you
I
log
have no-
stuff kind of like the effects, or like do you sort of like kind of treat it as an experiment on yourself, like in terms of like your dosages?
Not
the
at this
effects?
point. I mean,
Because you've
once
done
you
it
do
for
it for
so
so
long.
long, you're just like
Well, I'm at the
just
point where
taking your vitamins, really.
I'm at the point where it's like and it's kind of cute because my family likes to refer to the little 10 milliliters as apples, and so when we're going around and we're like talking, it's just, do you want an apple? And so we like to joke, and my partner now jokes with it and says, an apple a day keeps the spooky away. Uh, but I take it just like taking an apple a day.
Right.
No, I mean like yeah. I mean it makes. I mean if you've literally done it for a long. I mean obviously.
Grief
your
has
family,
an
there's
excellent question. Specifically, which ones they are. There are a number of people in the Sanguivore community outside of our own group that do pursue their own studies in various ways. Some of them are actually capable of doing clinical type studies, and others are more, independently run. And unfortunately, it's difficult to get really good data and really good studies because this is something there simply isn't a lot of people to study to get a large group test for.
Like for me, I traveled to the United States. I met 8 Sanguivores. Well, some of them don't take as readily or as often. Some of them take a few drops in over months or years. Some of them take only with their other Sang partners. So it all depends on what kind of thing and what they're actually getting out of it to try to pinpoint it down. So trying to, and I did 9,000 kilometers through the United States to meet those 8 people. So the distance between people to actually get the testing and then allow for the scientific sharing across countries is quite large. And I don't know how all the legalities around that.
Of course, and even so, let's pretend you found 10 Sangs. Between them, how they get their blood, where they're getting it, the amount they're taking, all these things are not standardized. It'd be very difficult to produce a baseline, and because of that, um, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to get concrete evidence and study.
Although I'd
the-
really like to have that. It would be nice to
The
know
only
if
rea-
it's. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. I was just going to say the only reason I asked is because it doesn't seem that blood has a whole lot of um, uh, it doesn't seem like it contains a whole lot of vitamins really anyway. There are better uh, there are better parts of, I guess, the body that you could like choose from to get
I
like
guess you could
actual
eat a
minerals.
person, but that's frowned upon in
Well, no,
most
I'm talking about
societies.
like your like livers and
Well, again,
those
we're
better.
talking about what human component can you consume from another person without murdering them?
Well, he's
Well, I
trying to
mean,
he's
why
trying
does
to
it have to be
say
human for?
ask is why
Well,
is it human
oh,
or
why is it
human?
human?
Why not eat the
Because
organs
we
of
found the
animals?
best results from human. And again, to
Mm,
say the thing is, we're looking at a very top level breakdown of blood, saying, okay, water and proteins. But what those proteins are, what other components are in it, what those chemicals are, their composition.
well, blood has been tested. It doesn't have a whole lot of vitamins. I don't
It
know.
has substances in it, and it may not be a vitamin we're after.
Yeah,
It
no,
may be a
that's something I can
protein.
agree on because there's stuff in blood that
I
isn't
think it might
it's
be.
not
I
like
think
an actual
I
vitamin, but
can.
it's like properties that would
Well,
affect you. Like there's like
I will validate with Jamie, considering that
microorganisms.
vitamin B12 and that 7 of the Sangs that I know have to take vitamin B12 shots if they don't take. And it doesn't make a difference if they eat meat or whatnot. It does. They don't retain anything, so there might be a protein that they are getting that allows them to catalyze that and be able to move forward. And so without it, having those B12 shots is what keeps them moving.
I guess it all just boils down to the fact that I don't think humans were even designed to um, get anything out of drinking or eating blood. Um, I
A
don't
lot of
really see like
a lot of
how that.
European cultures drink blood, or they'll even cook with blood. They'll make all kinds of different blood
Yeah,
meals.
humans have been consuming blood
Asians will
since the beginning.
have blood soups and stuff. Africans, they will consume a whole blood cow in certain tribes. It's not uncommon for humans to drink blood, and especially in a lot of starvations when we had wars and famines, it was not uncommon for us to resort to cannibalism in other
It's
serious
just in the
cases.
West where particularly we don't do a lot with blood. It's not something we are even less so in North America. We use blood even less so.
But we have also large germ scares and stuff like that, and
I
we have a
Yeah,
was
lot of
I'm sorry. When I was referring to that, I was saying we weren't designed to like bats, mosquitoes, uh,
it's like
those
no, but
sorts
then
of
again,
animals.
we're also talking about a small group of people within the whole. We don't believe everyone would gain any value from having blood. So there's why do some people seem to gain some and why do some? Most people don't. That's another question I can't answer.
Yeah.
So for us to gain anything from it and why does it work? Is it in our heads? Maybe, maybe it's not, and I can't prove it either way.
So you are agnostic about it.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't believe
Yeah.
in the soul or magic or energy or anything.
and that's like what the most interesting part is that there's actually people who are, like you said, that they are actually looking into it. Like I would love the idea that one of the sanguivores like sat down with like their microscope and could actually identify like, oh, certain people have like a specific protein in their blood, and that's the blood that I get the most effect from. Like that would be very interesting if
There are
someone
people who
actually
have
like
tried,
had
and
breakthroughs.
I don't know how far those studies would go.
Because it'd be interesting if there was like a medical component, or if like just if you guys put your own blood up to be tested, so that all the people that consume blood, if there was a commonality between you guys, of potentially,
I mean,
like
that would
within
be
all your blood,
cool.
there was
I think that
synchronicity of like
again,
missing something, like
the
oh this blood is lacking.
the real problem we'd face is find 10 people who earnestly take blood, then put them under a microscope. But then you have to ask yourself the question of what the hell are they looking for?
Oh
And
yeah,
that's
no,
the problem.
yeah.
They don't know what to look for. I don't know what to look for. I'm not a scientist. I'm just someone who's trying to cope.
Yeah, so some sanguivore needs to become a multi-millionaire and have no other hobby other than wanting to know why they're a sanguivore, and they're gonna have to fund it, and fly all you guys out, and get to work, and hire some scientists to figure out what the hell's going on, because it's probably too niche to ever
I'm
get
totally
into.
down
But
for that.
I was like, but it's very interesting to me because I do like the idea that like because you've taken such like an agnostic and pragmatic view to it, it's like if it is unironically just like a crazy medical condition that like there's only like 150 people in the world that all share this blood disorder that like they are lacking specific energy protein or what it's
We
not
had
properly
this
making
one
ATP.
idea.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
there is a theory,
Awesome.
and this theory isn't generalized or accepted across the board or anything, and we could be totally wrong about it, but it is a theory, and that is has to do with why there's a lot of people who tend to be of European descent that tend to associate with this, while there's other people in different cultures of the world who might. Most of the people in our personal experience have a European heritage. And why might that be? And one thought had to go back to the fact of we're talking Eastern European, people of Eastern European descent. Could have they, throughout in some point in their developmental history of ancestry, encountered blights and things like that, which may have led to acts of cannibalism, things like that. Um, could that have had some bizarre mark upon their development? Could have that had produced a problem that was carried on, or something genetically um, going down the line? I really don't know for a fact, but I, trying to put pieces together, trying to understand why one does what they do, I really wish we knew. I wish it was a simple answer, but there isn't.
Have there been any scientific lectures on the uh, benefits of drinking blood and stuff?
I think people have tried. Again, we're talking about something that I don't think people know what to look for.
Well, I think there's a huge problem is that there's a lot of stigmatism around the word vampire, and the moment you talk about drinking blood, they automatically put you into that fantasy kind of group. And if you're looking for something substantial, they need to look at it more like as a hemophagy in another animal species. Like, so we have lampreys, like he was saying, bats, insects, and taking it from a more medical standpoint is hard because then you're having to separate the two. And yeah, there's still lots of lectures on vampirism and what vampires are, and literature and fiction. But
Well, I'm just saying, completely from a secular point of view, don't you think that it would be reasonable to believe that if this was true, there would be a huge wealth of knowledge and people would be having to drink, and
well, if you
there'd be
look at
some
it this,
knowledge. I can't find anything.
well, if you look,
That's
Could you
that's
direct me to something?
well, if
I
you look at it this,
can't because I don't have those studies. We're talking a fringe on fringe on fringe. There's nothing to go on here.
well, if you even doing phlebotomy is extremely rare within the vampire community. Most people are cuts and stuff like that, and it's just been more recent where we're more strict on using sanitary and understanding health risks and stuff like that. And so before that, it was if you hurt somebody, like back in not even 100 years ago, if you got a cut from a sliver, it could possibly give you gangrene and die. So I think for me personally, I think a lot of the scare for vampirism, past consumption, and all those other elements is that if somebody was hypothetically taking blood from somebody, they would more likely kill them or harm them to the point that they would not be able to function.
Okay, and some of the chats just asked, but like, by the way, I'm not sure about it, but I'm asking, are most of the people white? You said European descent. I just assume you meant white people, or like, I'm assuming not too many vampires of color.
There's
Or
a
not
few
vampires,
in the
sanguivores.
community. It's not saying that we're devaluating them. The reason why we use European descent over any other classification is because uh, you can have mixed people in or PSCs inside European cultures, but primarily they happen to have migrated from a European background. That
Okay.
doesn't mean necessarily that they are Caucasian,
Okay.
because to be Caucasian means that it's a glorified bone structure that from some German guy who believes that the Georgian bone structure is ideal, but I think that's predated and a little archaic to call someone a Caucasian.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, it's extremely interesting.
Grief, I wish I had better scientific resources for you.
I just wanted to say one last thing. I wanted to give you the benefit of the doubt because I'm interested in all sorts of stuff. I'm not like emotionally connected to. I'm not afraid of blood drinkers or any of that stuff. Um, and I would just want to ask one other thing because I've been looking around and it seems like there isn't any scientific proof that blood will do anything for you. It will give you any benefits, and there's only like negative proof. And I'm not saying that. I mean, there isn't really a whole lot of scientific proof for the negative reason either. Just that it just doesn't give you any benefits. Do you think that that they're really just uh, that there's maybe like lying, or what do you think it may be?
I just think there's simply just not enough people to test to get any conclusive evidence one way or another.
Well, normally when we test things, I think it has to do with more when we want to solve something. So, like, we're going to solve AIDS or we're going to solve smallpox. Those have large implications over a large, let's say, smallpox over children. And so we're going to put a large amount of money and emphasis to solve for X because it can save potentially lots of lives. If it only affects a very, very almost invisible amount of people, the amount of funding and money that are going to go into that. And we already, on a base level, know fundamentally what blood can do for, let's say, if we want to transfer to another patient, we know their blood type, we can match it up, we can match tissue samples. Past that, we don't really need to know much. It'd be nice to know from a hematologist point of view if we could have one of them eventually elaborate a little bit more. That would be really nice. But for paper wise, I don't think that there's a body supply to require that.
Nobody's going to really study this unless some really,
like Skid said, unless one of the Sanguivores decides to become a millionaire.
I'm
this
not
is
going
not
to
something
downplay
that
what you guys
medical
are
injury.
saying. You guys are telling me, and a lot of these other people, that this is actually something that is really beneficial to your life, and I think that
We feel it is, but I also
It could be in
agree.
our heads.
I say it could be psychosomatic as well.
Because the
I
placebo
don't have
effect's
proof
about
to
the same
back my.
percentage of you guys, correct? Like basically, like the number. You know, there's like certain people that are persuaded by the placebo effect. It's like there's probably it's like
Let's
that's
say-
a low enough percentage that could be the same as like the vampire drinking community that you're like, you do it and you
I
get
would
the
be
feeling.
perfectly fine if Grith went and became a hematologist and did a bunch of tests and worked with Jamie and I, and we found some other sanguivores that would be willing to do it, and we find out that 100% it's in our head and it's just a placebo. I'd be perfectly fine with that. At least I would know, but I don't know, and I just know what feels good for me in my experiences.
And you've tried other things as well, right? It's not like you just you drank blood once and you're like, oh, this. It's like you had the problem. You probably tried traditional means, you tried vitamin packages, whatever the hell, and this is the thing that you actually get a physical effect from.
And like for me, it's not like what the other people in the vampire community, because a lot of them will experience it during puberty, or as they call awakening. Or I like to say is they become aware of a need. Like for me, it's always been at the forefront. Like since I've been blind and stuff, so I've always harmed people and enjoyed what comes out of them. Like it's not something that I know that sounds really scary. I'm a very socially adjusted person. I didn't know that they were people because I couldn't see them.
I wasn't aware you were blind.
Oh, this was while I was blind. I didn't understand that they were other people, and they weren't I didn't see them as my sisters. They just were sounds.
So and you're not blind anymore?
Oh no, I love Canada and I love our free healthcare system. I had three surgeries, and my fourth was just a flying test under Dr. Taylor, which is a eye doctor surgeon. I don't know the proper name for it, but they flew him in from Jamaica to make sure that I had vision by the age of 8.
Hell yeah! Okay, that's crazy. So you actually experienced life as both blind and not blind. That's almost an interview in itself. What the hell that's like? Going from the transition of never. Yeah, what was it? That's interesting as hell. Okay.
My first experience with color or with sight was I saw a very pale blue object, and as I ran towards it, it got brighter and brighter and bigger and bigger and bigger until I hit it, and it was my family car.
Oh wow.
That was a little rude awakening there, maybe. Oh, and welcome Excalibur. I brought you in. I don't know if you wanted to say anything, or because you're obviously part of the VC community as well, correct?
Yes. I was many years ago, and then I stopped for quite a while. And I've basically mostly been providing commentary and chat on a historic basis when things about the community come up, new vampire media is causing influxes of membership, why when you go to certain communities the default response is hostility, and kind of where that comes from, and what those communities have generally experienced in the past to make that the default response.
So what do you like consider yourself currently like as in the community? Like what's your like how would you describe your role in the vampire community currently?
Um, I mean, I would say I identified as saying it at one time.
Okay.
I've since gone on from that to take it down to certain other things that I don't necessarily want to go into because I don't want to take away from the subject matter of Jamie and Spooky. But I mean, I think the most apt thing to say is just that I'm a VC member who's knowledgeable on the subject and looks at it from a research standpoint more than anything else.
Interesting. So do you have any maybe scientific sources or anything like to like kind of like satiate grief? Like, is because that is something I sort of figured there'd be like at least some threads on the internet of people sort of describing like these more in depth theories. Because I feel like somebody's got to be like into blood science who's also saying like someone's got to be in university doing blood science or some sort of biology, and they're just like, oh, it could be X, Y, Z. You know? Like I'm
Yeah,
surprised there's
yeah,
not theories.
and the two things I want to touch on is first the vitamin B12 thing that I think Spooky had brought up is interesting on the one hand, and it may be something to do with that. Then again, I think if you did vitamin B12 supplements for Sangs at large, some it would maybe work for, some not. So that may have something to do with it. It may not. In terms of concrete sources, I don't know that I have anything specific for grief. I think one of the closest things we came to, more from a an analysis point of view than a necessarily study, was the VVC, which is Voices of the Vampire Community, which includes size and all the other metaphysics believers, but does have a lot of large prominent figures. They did surveys that got more responses from self-identifying vampires than I think anyone else has to date. But those were very broadly worded surveys, if I remember correctly. And I think if you Google the VVC, they may have those surveys and what they collected available somewhere.
I think
But that
that's
was
Avis,
years
isn't it?
ago. Yes, that was.
I can supply the link for that. But no, if you want to share in, I like contrast, and if you have a different experience, Excalibur, go right ahead. I wouldn't mind you joining.
Yeah, no, I mean, I dread to touch on it a little bit because it's not necessarily something that I think would even go over as well as even practical sanguinarians would. But I've likened my original, identification to Sang, and therefore more with a natural predatory instinct. I guess I'll put it that way. Whereas right now, as humans, we exist in a society where people are generally not, fighting each other, hurting each other, killing each other, predatory, etc. And I find a natural identification to looking at people and situations through the lens of the way I assume a predator in an animal kingdom looks at the world. And that's sort of my lens through which I view things. Now, this could be, mental issues, could be whatever. My personal belief is that most people integrate well to being in a society and conducting themselves, within that, and some people don't. I don't find very much comfort in it myself.
So like yours definitely has like a more because I feel like it's like the other both Jamie and Spooky. It's like more of like a vulnerable nature of like them and the donors have a relationship. Whereas like when you were an actual sang with your attitude, was it a like not a predatory thing, but like where you're more taking the blood. You're not like sweet talking donors and receiving it. Was it more like that for yourself because that your attitude's so different towards it?
No, because the thing and the reason why I hesitated to bring it up is when you view things that way and when you admit to viewing things that way, you have to temper that because it's very easy to go from, I view things in a predatory lens to, being a danger to oneself or others, and so you have to temper that. and you very much have to appear, regardless of what you may believe personally, to be as safe as possible because you don't want to make waves, you don't want to attract attention, because the last thing you need is to have anyone in any professional position of power to go, oh, this person's not safe, let's restrict their freedoms.
Okay, that's like really interesting. Do you find like that your perspective almost like a singular perspective, or like do other people kind of have the same? Because I sort of understand what you're saying about your attitude, like about society in general, but in terms of like how that translates to the vampire community, is this like a shared belief, or is this something that you're kind of like unique in your own way with?
I stopped being a part of the VC before I really discussed too much of this with everyone else. And again, back in the years where I was active, um, the base question of the metaphysics and saying, I don't know about metaphysics and size and otherkin and all that. The point at which I was in and the communities which I was in, those were things you did not say and you did not talk about because you would be out on your ass fairly quickly. And so my response was, you know what, I think a little differently than these people. I still value these people and these communities and everything, but it's probably best that I go because if I start saying what I really think, they're going to make me go anyway, and then I don't have the option to return should I want to.
Wait, sorry, I don't know if I followed that. Like,
Yeah, no. So I essentially, to answer your question more directly, there may be people that identify with this, but I wouldn't know because I said, it's probably best for me not to bring this up
oh, okay, yeah,
in the
so you wouldn't,
communities
yeah.
that I was in.
Okay, no, I understand what you're saying. That's interesting. Okay, so you have completely like I mean, because you seem very knowledgeable in, like the history of vampirism and all that stuff, and like you've obviously been paying attention to the community. How long have you been like how many years have you identified with this, and like how long have you been a part of it?
I would say the probably just about 15 years, somewhere in that vicinity.
Okay, that's a
The
long time.
places I come from, and Jamie and Spooky might recognize some of these names. I started out on Drink Deeply and Dream was one of the sites that I started out at. I had a lot of friends that also visited sanguinarius.org, which was a very big site, still kind of is, although I don't think they're nearly as active. And I was very surprised within the last couple years to see how many VCs moved over to Discord, which makes them, I think, a lot more accessible. And actually, one bone of contention that I think I might have with Jamie and Spooky, if I happen to have one, because they're very, very reasonable people. Um, I think there are a few med-sang or practical sanguinarian groups that I've observed that have more or less seemed to be going down the same roads. And I think some of those divisions that I see are arbitrary and more about who gets to be at the forefront and deciding, you know, uh, arbitrary things, what the group's named, what colors the tiers are, and what specific little niches they consider okay or not okay within the groups. The red seller discord was brought up, I think, and whatever objections they might have to that discord, everything that I've seen and looked at, and I did join their discord and take a look at it as well, these seem like two very analogous groups to me.
We were a part of that group, and I was very active within that group. But because of my stronger positions against the entertaining of ideas of mysticism and kin and such, it set us apart.
I haven't seen too much of that in acceptance over there. Not that I'm very active there at all, and so I
That's because
definitely
it's,
defer to you on that.
Are
well,
you in the
I'm sorry, Spooky, I didn't catch that.
there's
I said
the group is there's a public and a more of a close off
private?
part of the site,
Gotcha.
but generally speaking, um, we will openly say that psychic vampirism isn't vampirism, while they would not say such a thing.
They will hide in the lamprey room and say it. They won't say it publicly.
Right, and I think it's very silly and arbitrary of them not to be able to make that distinction or make that statement, because 90% of what they do say leads down that road. It may just be that they don't want the fight with the size and the
Yeah.
kin, etc. Um,
Well, they want the good PR. Everybody does, and it's not that the skin and the size are enemies or this and that. We're all people at the end of the day, and I think we're all just trying to be nice to each other.
mhm.
Why is psychic vampirism not vampirism?
Because you're not drinking blood.
Okay. Why
Yeah,
do you
no,
not
that's
believe? Do
pretty
you
based.
believe in it? Not in any way.
No, we already went over all these. They're completely they're pragmatic with it. They don't believe in any of the other stuff. Like they respect them and they don't they don't ridicule them, but they're 100% not. Like they don't like there's so in the med sayings you were saying that the mysticism was brought up. Are there people in the med saying community that actually are saying that they can drink blood without any consequences? Was that part of the reason that you've separated
There
yourselves?
are a few in there that do believe that. I'm not going to use any names, but there's also some that believe that they
But med
have
saying
met
is
classical
medical, right?
vampires. There's some that believe that all kinds of different things.
But
That's a
like,
separate group, and I really would rather, personally,
oh,
I would
not
rather
talk about
not.
them. Okay,
I don't
no.
want to talk about their what they do.
I just feel like it's just
I'm
such an
not
insane contradiction of like how could you say
personally
you're
going to do
medical
that.
but then be consuming something with when saying you're immune to it, like knowing that you're doing it for a medical reason, the medical repercussions of things. To say I'm immune, it's like it seems just like a crazy like the cognitive dissonance it would take to do that just seems wild. So I mean, if that was the reason you separated from that group, it makes 100% sense because like I don't really understand how those people could exist. Because I understand like either your perspective or the perspective that you're a completely completely immune. But if I'm completely immune, I'm definitely not using needles. I'm sucking the blood out because I think like I think I'm an ancient beast or I think I have powers. So it's definitely I don't know. It's interesting that the medical sanguivore community would have people in it that would be so I guess still dealing with the
Well,
esoteric
I'm
nature of
not.
it.
I'm not opposed to the kin and the size. It's just for the pragmatic section of things in the group that I run. I The reason why I keep belief and faith at the door is because we're dealing with, and I want to make sure that there's a huge level of importance that we're dealing with people's health, and that I need that respect at the forefront. I don't need somebody when I'm offline or sleeping telling members that you don't have to worry about catching AIDS. I want that health at the right and that safety right at the forefront, and keeping the faith and the belief in that Jesus can cure you from something is I want that at the door, because we're dealing with people's lives.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's oh sorry. I was Excalibur. Someone in the chat. This Shadow Ski guy. He seems very knowledgeable on the community as well. He's been kind of going off in the chat. He says
Mhm.
he's sort of like a vampire elder, quite different from the earlier guest. I think he's spoken about beast earlier in quotes. If I got that correctly, very touchy subject. Uh, do you,
The beast, from what I've understood, is like what they call the hunger. Some people will also refer it to toofing as a cute little word. Whenever you feel the hunger, like whenever you walk around and you can literally see people's veins, and you could easily like think to yourself, I could throw a 16 at that, and I could just easily just tap that really fast. There's still that hunger at the forefront, and that usually is what they refer to as the beast.
Quick translation of what she just said. A 16 at that, she was making a joke about saying you could easily draw blood from a well exposed vein because it's a large vein and a 16 is a larger needle.
okay,
That's
I like how you said that because it's like a rap term as well. Oh, you kick him with a 16. And you're like I don't know. It was very funny how you just said that. Oh, you hit him with a 16 and then get some milliliters out of him. That's interesting. So you actually like when you're walking the street, like really that is very interesting. So is that what the beast is that or Excalibur is that your understanding as well? I'm just not like because he said oh it's very it doesn't seem like a touchy subject. Like if you obviously you crave
Kind
the blood.
of, because I think the way that I would frame it is, um I don't know many Sengs who wouldn't, say that, oh, when I'm feeling the hunger, I feel this way that people describe as beast hunger, whatever they prefer, and identify with it on that level. I'm saying that way that they feel is just a constant in the lens of how I always feel in the way I view things. And so it's sort of a constant for me is what I would say.
To feel that way would be, to me, an indication you aren't taking enough. If you take on a regular, you don't feel that.
Like I know that.
Or can you just not get your fill, Excalibur? Like, is it different for you, where just the thirst is really like it doesn't get like you can't satiate yourself?
I would say that I couldn't say for certain because I haven't been in a situation of having a very structured donor setup, and sort of seeing what is my enough level, and sort of doing an analysis of that. That's not an opportunity that I've personally had, and it's not something I'm directly pursuing at current. I find that normally focusing that feeling into other pursuits and trying to make it a productive um, method to pursue whatever I'm doing at work or whatever I'm creating on my own with making content or whatever it might be. That's where I choose to focus that currently.
I think that's neat until levels. Am I able to ask him 2 questions?
Absolutely, definitely.
Okay, my first question is because I made some assumptions based on just knowledge of watching people in the VC. But you said that you have limited accessibility to donors and stuff. I made I don't know if you were in here during the conversation, but they were saying, well, there's this sexuality that comes sometimes. And so I'm assuming that you more likely surface feed. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But have you had the point where this is your only donor and they may have wanted certain things or request certain things for the offer of their blood? Have you ever had those dynamics happen?
No, I haven't had those dynamics, and I have surface fed, but normally very very small amounts. And because I didn't notice a difference from those small amounts, it's why I generally looked at it as well, maybe this isn't necessarily helping, but I am open to the idea that more could have been a solution.
Yeah, because I know for me, if I take sometimes between 10 to 20 milliliters a day. I don't think about it anymore. It doesn't. I don't have that beast, that tooth or whatever word they use. It doesn't come to my forefront. I can walk around and never not have to think about it.
Hmm.
Right. And the other thing that I wanted to mention on subject of donors and access, one of the things that I saw recently upon coming back to certain VCs now that they've moved to Discord, is I found the Black Books, which seems to be a donor network, seems to be its primary thing. Do you guys have any relationship with that? Any thoughts on it, etc.?
If you actually look on the contributors, I helped with the French translation for the Black Books. Marks me as Catherine on there.
Could you just
Uh,
describe the black books really quick, just for the audience?
the Black Books is a page for people who require energy or blood, and it's you allow yourself to mark down your experiences with different either cuts, venipuncture, different types of psi feedings, and it allows you to put yourself globally on the map and see if there's any donors around your area. So if, let's say, hypothetically you wanted to entertain and get yourself tested and go and help out a vampire, so to speak, you can join the Black Books and do that and find where they are. There are obviously some risks involved, and I think they have some good clauses where it's like you're the one that's willing to go and meet these people. We're not forcing you to do anything. Make sure you are safe and meeting good environments, but it's allowing for that meet and transaction. As well, it
Nice.
also has a really awesome FAQ section that they filled out, and it's based by popularity vote, so you can actually see which ones are the most relevant links. I can put it in the Discord chat.
Yeah, definitely. That's okay. That's interesting as hell. Okay. So I mean, like the internet's really revolutionized like the way the community runs, then hasn't it? Because it just allows for such a wider level of connectivity and like an access. Like I just,
Yeah, I,
yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Go on.
No, no, it's fine. No, one of the things I would say is for med and practical sangs and using phlebotomy needles, etc. I don't think that would be nearly as prevalent or as practiced without online resources. It's great that people who probably at the start had medical background and were also vampires and thought of this, and then demonstrated that knowledge to others. I remember when I came in years ago, the thing was lancets, which diabetic lancets, the things that shoot the blade out really quick to prick people, and butterfly needles, which are an extremely small type of needle. Those were the most advanced, if you want to call it that, methods that anyone was talking about at that time.
Yeah, for me, Maddie's just well, Jamie stepped out of the room, but for me, I got trained on phlebotomy when I was in my mid-teens by my godmother, who's a doctor in North Carolina. So I do have a formal training in the sense that it was from a medical professional.
Mhm.
I don't know 100% where where Jamie has gotten her medical training, but I know that most of the sayings that do phlebotomy go out and at least get a kit or some kind of training facility or class and learn that way.
Mhm.
Although I still like to have the forefront, if you are practicing phlebotomy, at least let your donor know what training you have, so that way they are prepared if they're willing to, like, let's say you're just learning and you need somebody to practice on, at least let them know that, and that you're not, and don't say that you're like totally like 100% I've been doing this for blah 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 blah.
Just
And
stick yourself a few times.
Do you find there's like an aversion to needles though, where people like they would really prefer the surface feeding thing because it's like a more intimate and more
You
sexual, but also
say
like
that.
because I just feel like because I feel like I mean someone in the chat wrote needles are gross. I'm like I'm kind of that way. I mean I can handle the needle with the doctor and stuff, but I like if it was
Like,
like for
I
a
like it.
favor, like oh well obviously you do, Mister Shooting Up the Chris, but for me it's like I don't like needles, so I think it's like if the option was like to let you suck the blood out, like even if it wasn't a sexual thing, it was to give you blood. It's like I just feel like I wouldn't want the needle because I'm a pussy. Like
I don't like surface feeding for lots of reasons. One, it's capillary blood. I don't
oh,
like that
that
as
didn't
much
have the
as
one. Oh,
venous.
that doesn't have the
I
bleeding. Which
also
one's was
don't
it?
like surface feeding because it's not
Oops.
as sanitary.
I didn't put the right name.
Because your
I have the one with
mouths
the
are
band-aids
dirty.
on stream actually.
And third, you don't get
Oh,
very
there we go.
much.
There it is.
Even in a good surface feed, you get less than you would in a single tube. It's a it's not a very good risk reward. I mean, you cut the person, they bleed, they get you arrange this time to do this, and you relatively get very little.
It also
Yeah, it's
depends
also
on
less
where you're cutting
sanitary,
them,
right? Like it's
and
just
it's a yeah. Always use sterile blades. Always make sure you clean the area. Make sure you use equipment that you know is safe and reliable sources. Um, Make sure you have the right band-aids in case the cut goes wrong or they move. You want to make sure you have the right band-aids to keep the skin together in case that does happen. People do spook and things do go bad. It's always to be over-prepared than to be underprepared. And make sure you cut in places that don't have a lot of underlining veins or anything like that, so you don't want to do any permanent damage to them.
Just want to say the needles feel good.
If you're done right, you shouldn't feel the needle at all.
I'm assuming that's like a good. Yeah, that's probably like your selling point at this point, being so experienced. You're like, oh, by the way, like it's like I'm not like these other guys. Like I can crush it with the needle. Like like when it comes like it's like I'm assuming because there is like a supply and demand sort of thing. Whereas if everybody knows like oh like Jamie she kills it with the needle. Like when I need to get my blood drawn like it's not gonna hurt. Whereas other people.
I just saw
like,
the big red bus at the store, dude.
What's that mean?
They're giving out. That's like a blood donor thing in the U.S.
Oh.
They're giving out $10 gift cards, Jamie and Spooky. You guys gotta up your game.
Haha. Oh my god, the
You know what,
sang bus. The sang
It's
bus.
so sad. Everyone, I mean, a lot of people do surface feeding because it's what they know, it's what they're comfortable with, it's what their donors are comfortable with. And that's that's them. Um, when you've learned phlebotomy, though, at this point, you're like, my time's valuable. My donor's time's valuable. I'm not going to see them every day. I'm not dating them. I don't have time for that. And I don't want to hurt them either. I can visit them once, and I can be good for a whole month, or I can take a surface feed and get it'd be like licking a steak and saying you just had dinner. It doesn't really have enough to be worthwhile.
That definitely makes sense. Like I think like when Excalibur was talking about like doing surface feed, it seems like if you have the actual thirst that you'd want to drink like an actual substantial amount and be like, really get your fill of it. Rather, it almost feels like it's too much of it. Yeah, so you're saying a tease. Like the surface feeding is just a tease. So when people just want surface feeding, do you like? Because it's almost like you're not getting what you want. Is there a part of you that's sort of like you don't even want to go with people who are only into surface feeding just because you're really not.
It's not fair of me to do that because some people simply have never had the opportunity to learn phlebotomy. It's not right for everyone to learn that. That might not be right for them.
Not everyone needs that volume.
So the thing is that it would be wrong of me to do that. It's just that I know for me, it's it would be a not productive activity to use surface feeding as an exclusive means.
All right, and that makes total sense. It's like you're not gonna completely exclude people because they're only into. Do you kind of slowly work people towards the phlebot or the blood drawing aspect? Like if you were to surface feed on someone because they weren't comfortable the first time, and then you're like, you just sort of kind of get like it's almost like a relationship. Like you take things further and further. Like would the goal just be to get them to needles? Oh no, it's not. Okay.
My donors, I've worked. I arranged our whole situation with going with needles right off the bat. It was already laid out what to expect and things like that. So it wasn't a gradual process. And someone else also just asked, "How do you feel about your own blood being drawn?" I don't really like it. Um, I just I don't freak out about it. I watch what they do to see if I can learn something. But it's actually kind of funny because I turn into something like a golf announcer, kind of quietly announcing step by step what they're doing. What needle they're doing, what process they're doing, what vein they're probing and palpitating, and just sometimes they're like, "What the hell?" I just say I studied or something.
That's like when I go to the doctor.
An expert.
When I go to the doctor, they're like, "Man, you have some serious damage on this vein." It's like, yeah, I don't know. I get my blood drawn a lot. There's a lot of scar tissue there.
For me, with my donors, I look at that. Well, obviously, I have both blades and venipuncture. I know some people don't like needles and they are afraid of them. So I do let them off for the ability to use cuts. I'm not opposed to surface feeding or venipuncture. It doesn't make a difference to me. Whatever they're comfortable with, I'm willing to go with.
Unbound.
You might cut out, Jimmy.
Unbound. You said fitness. Faintness? No, I don't feel faint or anything. I watch carefully when they're drawing my blood. It doesn't bother me.
Just a learning experience.
When you're so it's not really an issue. I guess.
For me, I hate my blood being drawn. No, don't do that to me. I go no. I get dizzy and I'm like, nope, this is not happening. I've had one of my friends in high school like sign me up. Yeah, we're going to go join blood drive and we're going to go give it to the rest of the community. I'm like watching it go out of my body. I'm like, nope, this is a whole bag of nope. This is a nope. Can we untie me? Nope.
What about for a $10 gift card though? Huh?
$10 isn't really worth anything but $10. What are you gonna do with $10?
And it's a gift card from a movie theater.
Oh wow! So it'll get you half.
It doesn't even buy you a ticket. Yeah.
Hey, for me, I make sure that when my donors come over, I make sure if they want any of the beverages, doesn't matter what they want, I will go get it for them. So if they want some fucking expensive Puree water, you'll have it. If it's some version of ice cream and sweet thing, you will have it.
What if it's booze? Then you get a little liquor in the blood. You get a little extra.
I don't recommend getting a person liquored up beforehand. It's a blood thinner and that can potentially lead to complications, potential excess bruising or clotting issues. You just don't want to do it.
Do you ever think all this shit ahead? Because I wouldn't even think about that at all. I'd be like, oh yeah, sure, I'll get you a bottle of wine, and then complications. You're like, I wouldn't even think about that.
Well, the same thing goes whenever you go to donate blood at the clinic. It's no different. They're going to still give you the same risk. Don't do any heavy exercise. Don't do any drinking like within the next 24 hours. All kinds of these regular precautionary measures.
Damn. I don't think I've ever been able to give blood because I do drugs. Like I'm pretty sure they just were like, yeah, no, we don't want your blood.
They're like, hey, you've
I'm,
been around the bush.
I've never done needles or anything like that, but I think it was like even if you smoke weed, I think they were like, nah, we don't want your blood. I was like, all right, white. It's legal in Canada. I don't know. It's like if you don't want my blood, that's fine.
Yeah. Well, it's not usually present in the blood. It's normally stored in the lipids, so I don't think it's a deterrent in Canada. I know our buddy, my roommate, he donates blood, and he's, as we've mentioned, an avid cokehead. Not cokehead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I was like,
pothead.
Wait, what? Oh, yeah, the walking edible.
And he's a walking edible.
Goddamn weed snorters.
Well, he doesn't snort weed, but he dabs a lot.
Snorting that weed, getting those big lines.
No, we're not smoking human blood and dabbing human blood. That is gross. That would be smell nasty. We already went over.
No, we gotta. We're gonna make that a thing. We're making jewel pods full of blood. I'm selling to the vampire community. I'm getting rich. That's my thing.
And making walking edibles.
I mean, that's also a good idea. You know, like literally, you just go to like California and Colorado. You find the people that work at dispensaries, and then they themselves sell their blood on the site as like an edible. You know, you come up, take a sample, eat a little stone.
Well, there is a decent vampire community in California, so.
There you go, right? Like, you just gotta find the guys at the dispensaries walking edibles.
You could do both in a weird way. I mean, I don't typically mix blood in food. As long as it's not heated, it should work. So if you made like magic butter and then you were to add the blood to it in some, I could see this working in a chocolate application so long as the chocolate is not heated too warmly. If it's too much above bloody temperature, you could run into trouble, but you can temper chocolate down, which means you might be able to work with it feasibly and make like a ganache, some sort of blood ganache.
And sounds terrible.
Like a blood marijuana recipe.
Chocolate and
I don't know.
Chocolate and blood go together like cocaine.
I mean, if you want to eat some blood and some weed.
Together.
Like cocaine and waffles?
Oh, is that something? Do you pair the blood with food and stuff? Is that like a thing? Like, would you
like
be like,
wine.
I'm having steak tonight. Like,
it's
I
okay
got my
with
blood.
wine.
Oh, like you'll drink
Some
the blood
people
with
do.
the wine.
Some people pair it. I knew one person who liked to put dinners together for his friends. So like with each plate, would have a couple tubes with it, and he'd pair a wine with it.
Like Hannibal Les.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of a neat little thing they had going on.
Yeah.
More romanticized, because it almost seems like you're doing more for vitamins and stuff. So I'm assuming you sort of take it as though like anyone takes a supplement or something. You're like the way someone pops a
It's
vitamin
true,
C pill. You're like,
but you can enjoy it too. You can still like it, like the flavor, enjoy it. So you don't have to hate the fact you have to do something in your life.
You have like special blood glass like people have for wine.
I don't really do that. I have put in a glass, but blood is sticky. And if you put it in a glass, you have blood loss that's stuck in the tube. Then you have blood that's lost that's stuck in a glass. So you don't want that. You just don't want to have that.
You just gotta spray the glass.
My mom has little brass goblets, and she'll warm them up in the oven, not too warmly, and then she'll pour them in there, and she likes them in the warm. So she'll let the goblets warm them up.
Yeah, because when you pull it in the fridge, they're cold. So you have to warm them up.
So the blood is better consumed warm, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's warm.
Tastes a lot better warm. Cold, it's just sort of odd. It's got a savoriness to it, and that cold, it doesn't quite work well.
It's crazy. Like the first time we talked, Jimmy, you explained like the separation, but like seeing it in that picture, like just how much it separates is crazy.
Yes, it'll separate very quickly. Once it has been taken out of the body, and so yeah, you need to agitate it a little bit. You don't want to agitate it too much, otherwise you can have what's called hemolysis occur, in which you'll start noticing the separations turn pink as the cellular walls of the blood start breaking down.
That's bad.
So you kind of want to be gentle with it as to not cause it to start breaking down too fast.
Somebody said, wouldn't it be more intimate to take it directly from a person?
We're not interested in intimacy.
That's what to say. They've went over that plenty of times.
for me, it's something I eat at my family dinner table. It's not something I bring to the bedroom.
A
Especially like
long-term partner, you wouldn't want to involve them then. Like it really is like in your life. It's just like it's like a maintenance thing. It's like a nutrition thing. It has literally like you would not involve a partner with this.
I mean, it's not like you'd be in bed with a girl and then suddenly be like, "Excuse me, Leia, let me just shoot myself with my diabetic pen because it's really hot." You know, I mean, you just do
True.
what you do and you move on.
But there's just such a like I guess a romanticization. I can't even pronounce shit. It's been romanticized like vampires, vampirism. Like it almost feels like if you, I don't know. Yeah, I guess that's like the misconception of it. Like, just like the way
that's
that
the
the way
the
it's
word. The word vampire's done that to it. The word has associated itself with all of these images and expectations
Of sexy death.
and all this fancy stuff. That's why we call ourselves sanguivores. We just separate ourselves. Is it the same thing by certain people's definition? Probably, but we don't use a word that is used by all of these other mediums because we don't call ourselves immortal. We don't call ourselves special. We're just people. We don't have powers.
Because at that point it's sensationalized, you know, like
Easily fetishized as well.
yeah. Are you guys like close friends with anyone that is that does sexualize it, fantasize it, or sensationalize it like that? And
I was friends with a few people that did it. That they don't consider me friends anymore, but there are
because of the stance you guys kind of took, that
Yeah.
whole politics falling out type of thing.
I don't enjoy slander, and even if I call you out on it, it's like it's rude and it's not polite. Like I'm not one to hold hate or anything like that, but it's like it's not polite.
Some people do it for whatever reason, you know. I mean, that's I find that it causes me to have questions. Why, you know? Because again,
Well, I think it
if it
boils down to but they I don't know if you've experienced this, Excalibur, but they call it like saying elitism, where if I say that if you're fetishizing blood and you're only having blood for the arousal, that makes you a blood fetishist and not a vampire. But in the community, a lot of people want that title. They want that affirmation that I am a vampire because I drink blood. And if they're saying they're only doing it in this one particular and only taking in this one particular fashion, and you kind of allude to that it's just a fetishism, they will become extremely hostile and defensive.
for some people, the image and the aesthetic and all of that stuff is what it's about to them. It is just as meaningful to them. Unfortunately, we see that as kind of bad because when we have to go meet people and try to look for new donors or defend ourselves or explain ourselves to anyone for that matter, we have to somehow overcome all of the preconceived notions that that part of the community has set into place.
Yeah, because I
And
mean, like, just even me going into you guys' Discord, I 100% like just because of without doing any research, just looking for people to interview. That's like immediately what I thought. I was like, oh, I'm going to talk to vampires, you know, with that like thought in my head, like these people are.
if here's an analogy. If you come to me telling me that you love a lot of rap music and all this kind of stuff, and I'm coming and saying, well, rap and I know this sort of culture that I have a hard time with, and whatever, you know, maybe I'm misjudging because I only know what I've seen, the loudest and maybe the worst examples of the culture, the parts of the music and the culture that doesn't necessarily represent the individuals who enjoy the music. And so
Like the misogyny.
Yeah.
well, yeah, we're going to talk about some of the really bad, you know, the people who show up in the media that like make a scene and
Make rap look bad.
make it look real bad to the wrong people. They send the wrong message. So in this case, we're talking about people who do this fantastic, you know, sensational vampirism stuff, and that's what the public sees because it's loud, it's colorful, it fills tabloid
Well, sex
newspapers
sells.
well. People will read on that. They aren't going to read about people like us because we're boring. We're not
You
interesting.
actually remember you telling me that like multiple times when I asked about the interview. Yo, Excalibur, your mic is echoing by the way. But
My apologies.
No, you're good. I remember you telling me that, like, you were just convinced that the interview would be super boring, because I mean, to you, it's just like a mundane topic, right? It's just part of your life. It's not anything extraordinary.
Dinner tables.
Yeah. I bought 5 packs of ramen, dude.
Eat those tapeworms.
Although I will admit,
Tapeworms.
Unbound, as much as I did have she was a heterosexual female. One of my last donors that moved to Winnipeg only preferred cuts, and she still enjoyed almost a sensual aspect of it from surface feeding. So I can understand how intimacy can easily be broken into that. I just felt like
But you guys try to do your best to keep it separated.
I do. I keep at the forefront that I'm not looking for a partner in this, and we're just friends.
See, like, if I was dating, like, let's say my girlfriend was a Sanguivore, I would be like jealous that she was sucking someone else's blood. She would put me on edge.
That's a challenge some people deal with.
Like, even just like consuming it the way that you guys do, I'd still be like, damn, she wants this man's blood, or I don't know.
Well, that's one of the dangers you face.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
like
Good morning, everyone.
yeah, good morning, Toke. In the middle of an interview, so
Sorry.
That's what comes out with the wild shit.
he's gonna like on the Dexies again, boys. No, but I
I'm
think
on
actually,
the whippets,
like,
mate.
I think
I'm on the
actually,
whippets, sorry.
okay, yeah, we gotta get out of here, Toke. Get the hell out of here. We're in the middle of an interview. But I think actually that's a good spot to maybe end the interview, because I feel like we've covered almost everything. Like, this was honestly amazing, like great insight, and also I think like kind of put, I don't know. I guess my big like question, kind of the end, is just sort of like how do you feel like you could grow your own community and it's like it feels like
Or
the
do you
community-
even want to grow it? Do you want
Yeah,
to grow
like-
your community?
like because you know 'cause the other one
I
is
mean,
growing,
our
right?
community has. It was created simply to create a space after we found ourselves unable to be in other spaces.
Yeah.
And
So out of necessity.
so we've created an environment, and if people come to it and they find it's useful, then I guess it's a good thing. But I never set out with it because I needed or felt that it was important at that point to try to become something in that community. This was a community that I found myself unwelcome in because of my views. And I feel it was unfortunate that it went so badly. It never had a chance to right itself or maybe let things heal. But that's how some communities are. So we had to create our own space. And I hope it helps someone. I don't think I'm a guru or an expert. And all I can do is try to make a space that allows for people to have a certain kind of conversation and do it safely.
Yeah, for me, I hearts all the community members, and so I like to make a space that I know that everyone I'm putting out that safety at the forefront, and people are happy, and people treat donors like they're real people and don't call them mundane or treat them unfairly, and that they have a voice.
One last quick question. I don't know. Did you guys talk about this when I was gone? But how did you guys like? I guess just like when was the first time that you felt the need to consume blood? Like, and how did so if somebody was new to that, like, if somebody joined your Discord out of curiosity, they've never consumed blood, they just like have an interest in it. What would you guys steer them away? Would you steer them towards it? And like, how do your own experiences tie into that?
Mine was in adolescence, as far back as I can remember, and I lived in Nebraska at the time. It wasn't exactly the, cultural hub of the states where you could, find some weird culture if you're looking for it. And I didn't have support in any normal sense of media. This was back in the early '90s, so the resources, what you could know. I just remember asking friends, and I remember having in my box. I had like a little box that I carried in my car, a wooden box, and it was my bleeding box. And I had some friends that I could get some from, and I remember that was really weird for them, and they just thought I was crazy. But that's kind of how I started. It wasn't neat and pretty or anything.
Neither was mine. As I said before, I was born legally blind, and everyone was a sound, and so I didn't associate people as people. Mom was a sound. Mom wasn't a gender or a color of skin. She was just a thing I could bump into. And so I ended up harming my siblings and my peers until I finally was able to see at the age of 8. I actually had decent sight with glasses with really like heavy binoculars. Um,
Coke bottles.
Coke bottles, that's a good
I wear those
example.
myself.
And
Birth control glasses, BCG.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I wear those myself, unfortunately.
And so after I got that, and I was put into an essay class, which is a social adjustment class for a few years, as I got to like navigate those. That these are your peers. That you don't hurt them. They have feelings and then go through scenarios and conversational things in social adjustment class, and that helped a lot. And then my because my grandmother's also and my mother's are also saying going to my grandmother's farm on the weekends in the summertime and learning how to repair rabbits and chickens and stuff like that and bleeding animals. And then talking about people and donors and how to navigate those conversations was just a natural process.
All right, so I guess from there we're gonna wrap up like the formal podcast interview. If you guys wanted to plug your Discord, if you even want people to be invited, if not, feel free.
Or
not
I guess
to.
no. Or did you guys have anything else you guys wanted? Did we not get to?
Yeah, just in closing, or anything else that you wanted to say, and then we will do like an after show where it's you guys can stick around if you want, and I guess less formal. Not that this is.
Yeah, we just love to get the VOD up. Like we got all this content. Like the last thing we want is someone saying the wrong word and like breaking TOS. Like it'd be great to get this up because there's just a lot of great points made, a lot of different. Just like very good. So it'd be nice to get this thing solved. We always somebody comes in and says one wrong word and it's like VOD's gone. So it'd just be fantastic to like get it up. But if there's anything like that we thought we might have missed or that you guys
just anything in closing
would like to elaborate on maybe like.
I think everything was really good. I would like to also like to hear, considering we do have another sang in the group, I'd like to also know what his experiences were, if he wants to include what he answered Skida's question as well.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, no, not a problem. No, I think I had what would be a typical coming to terms with it that most things that I've encountered in the VC would describe. Just kind of going through adolescence, having a certain hunger and a certain again, that predatory lens, and not initially having a full understanding of it. I was lucky enough to find, again, the first site that I went to was Drink Deeply and Dream. I was lucky that that was the first good real resource that I found. There were a lot of good people there. The board's basically dead now. But I was able to make connections with a lot of other Sangs and others who were able to provide a lot of good information and guidance. And I think that was really essential, to furthering my understanding and for even wanting to be, to having gone dark in the VC and coming back. If it wasn't for those initial experiences, I don't think I would have come back.
Alrighty, and then if you guys wanted to plug any of the communities you're a part of, for people that are interested, if they listen to it and say, oh, I'd like to learn more about this or it's something I'm interested in, feel free to do so. And we just wanted to thank you, Spooky, Excalibur, and Jamie for coming on and sharing your experiences.
Thank you very much. Yes, we're going to put a link in the general for you guys.
Yeah, no, you put the link and I'll put it into the Twitch chat as well. We'll see if we can get some people over there. Or if people are interested, why not? Then again, you don't want any trolls, though. So only if you're serious. No, we just put it in the Discord, because then it'll be serious people. I don't want trolls coming in there.
Are you stopping it now, Sid?
So that's the end of the podcast. We're going to come back for the after show in a second. I'll just stop this and restart it just so the VOD goes up, just so we can get it saved. Thanks so much for coming on, guys. If you guys are interested, they're called the Pragmatic Sanguivores. There's an invite in the Discord. The link to our Discord's in the Twitch chat right now. So if you want to hop in, go get it. Hop over there if you're serious about it. Thanks, everybody.